Have we got people coming in yet? Guests?
Yes, they are coming in now.
Okay. Are we ready to go live?
Go ahead.
Good morning, everybody, and welcome. I would like to convene this meeting of the Oregon Housing Stability Council for September 2nd, 2022. First order of business would be a call of the roll.
Thank you, Chair Hall. For the record, Councilmember DeFantorum is excused today. And Councilmember Farrell is joining by phone, and I'm trying to identify her right now. So we'll loop back with her. Chair Hall.
Present.
Councilmember Higginbotham.
Here.
Councilmember Lee.
Here.
Councilmember Mena.
Here.
Councilmember Rogers.
Present.
Councilmember Sandoval.
Here.
Thank you. Make it back to.
So we have a quorum of council members present. We move to the public comment portion of the agenda. And again, I would like to remind everybody to please, if at all possible, limit your comments to 3 minutes each. Again, 6 people are signed up, and I will call you in the order you appear on the list. And first up, Amber Cook. Is Amber Cook on the line?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, just fine.
Excellent, thank you so much. Good morning, Executive Director Bell, Chair Hall, and members of the council. The reality of our lives as renters at Milepost 5 The Studios is that our rights and our right to decent housing are both violated every single day in dozens of different ways. A prime example are the building's exterior doors, 3 of which have been left broken and unrepaired, 2 for almost a year and 1 for over 2 years. Anyone may walk up to any of these entrance doors and walk into the building where we live. Now free to do whatever they like to us in the property, in a building where we have to use communal facilities, meaning we have to leave our units to go to the bathroom and make food multiple times every day. Word got out, and now non-residents use them every hour of every day to enter our residence, squat here, and use the communal facilities. Anything that is not nailed down, and some things that are stolen from the property and from us. Toilets are plugged up daily, showers left in disgusting states, and the bathtubs full of urine, feces, and trash, now joined by cockroaches enjoying the food garbage left in them and not cleaned for days by management staff. There's been no hand soap in bathrooms here for 3 months because the owners, of course, don't want to pay to supply to all the walk-ins they allow in by not fixing the doors. Half the toilets are kept locked up to keep them from being further vandalized, but we pay functioning and stocked. These walk-ins also use our water in vast amounts, showers, toilets, drinking water, and laundry. We residents pay for these utilities as part of our rents. With a huge increase in utility use, we'll pay for this in the future and even higher rent and utility increases. With OHCS allowing CDP to raise the base rents here above the maximum legal limit, and almost everyone in the building receiving rent raises in a bad economy post a pandemic, we literally cannot afford for hordes of squatters to drive up our rents even further. In every way, these unsecured exterior doors endanger our safety in assault and theft, hygiene and disease, exposure to fentanyl residue, fire hazards with drug addicts burning meth and dropping from opioids, roach infestations, bed bug infestations, COVID exposure. Secured exterior doors are on the list of basic habitability requirements for landlords to charge rent. ORS 90.100 essential services definition include heat, plumbing, electricity, locks for exterior doors and windows, etc. We, the residents of Milepost 5, the studios, deserve a rent reduction each for every month those doors have remained broken and unsecured. And we deserve for OHCS to enforce compliance as the compliance authority for LIHTC properties, where the landlords and tax credit recipients are required to comply with all state and local laws to remain eligible. Thank you.
Thank you for your input. Is Tom Vincent on the line?
I'm not seeing Tom.
Okay, how about Sarah Padilla?
Good morning, this is Sarah.
Okay, the floor is yours.
Good morning, Chair Hall and members of the council. My name is Sarah Padilla, and I'm the Grant Portfolio Director at Habitat for Humanity of Oregon. I've been with Habitat for just over a year, and this past spring, I led the development of 4 successful LIFT applications in partnership with 3 local Habitat affiliates. I wanted to say thank you for these important resources. We're really excited for the year ahead, and we want to continue to support the network and work with our housing partners to reach more low and moderate income Oregonians. Also, I really appreciate the collaborative nature in which OHCS has worked with us over the recent months to create the forthcoming new flexible development program. These conversations have been really productive and valuable. I want to encourage OHCS to consider how to streamline the application process for the multiple opportunities that will be available soon, including LIFT and the new flexible development program, to the greatest extent possible in order to assist those organizations with limited capacity to be able to apply successfully. So we know that the complexity and the diversity of these resources, it makes it a challenge to streamline. However, we know that many Habitat affiliates and other smaller rural housing developers that serve rural communities operate without dedicated staff for resource development or fundraising. So a straightforward and accessible application process for multiple funding opportunities is truly critical to our ability to build more homes and keep pace with future housing demand in the state. So for this program to be successful, these programs, and achieve all of the goals for which they're intended, it will be key to provide an application that is clear, well-designed, and accessible. If not, there is real concern that these programs may be undersubscribed, including not reaching those families and communities of greatest need for affordable housing in the state. Thank you so much for your consideration.
Thanks for your input. Next, Neil Whitaker. Is Neil Whitaker on the line?
He is, he just needs to unmute.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Respected members of the committee. Yesterday, several neighbors to Milepost 5 received a letter from OHCS. This letter essentially advertises a somewhat cozy relationship between a state regulator and the industry they're supposed to monitor. The public can expect no investigation into how dangerous errors were made in background screening that are negatively impacting our neighborhood. Documented LIHTC and IRS violations will not be looked into, so we can expect no transparency and no accountability. Seemingly no one is responsible for the ongoing interior conditions at the studios. We are being asked to move forward without finding out how this was allowed to happen, and OHCS will stubbornly move forward without the tools to prevent it elsewhere. This letter was incapable of addressing the well-documented problems. The letter offers vague statements such as safety and well-being are of the utmost importance to OHCS. Well, if that were true, we would not have the wife of the president of Guardian Property Management in charge of the in-house screening company, allowing ineligible tenants to live here. This inept screening company may be responsible for all of Guardian's 110 properties. And I'm making a note here that your organization has essentially approved this system, even after it has been proven to place violent felons in a building with vulnerable people. This letter goes on to say, OHCS has remained in active dialogue with the property management. There's no engagement with the people who actually live here to get the whole story when an incident occurs. And through these chummy emails and subsequent secret phone conversations between Guardian and OHCS, we can see how a property deteriorated like this. Guardian and OHCS opted not to pursue an asbestos complaint in the studios from May. The property authorities still have not evaluated the extensive damage to asbestos in that attic as of today. Imagine if health inspections at restaurants were conducted like this. I can walk right in any one of the broken doors of the studios and witness substandard conditions as we speak. If the privacy rights of tenants were being respected, all doors would be functioning. We are just so baffled by the continual broken door thing. We will reach out to other sources for help. Thank you. I cede my time.
Thank you for your input. And we have Bradford Long on the line.
Hi, good morning, council. Thank you for having me today. Sorry, I'm having some audio issues. Apologies, I was on my phone on input here. Okay, sorry.
We're not able to hear you, sir. Shall we go to Bonnie Robbins, then maybe come back to Bradford Long and Tom Vincent?
Yes, Bonnie is on.
Okay, the floor is yours.
Thank you and good morning, council. We appreciate the chance to address concerns. I live next to the studios of Milepost 5, and I was one of the people that got a letter from Director Bell. It was very disheartening to have her seem to shut down any community dialogue and only reflecting the needs and the voices of corporations over the community. I'm very sorry to end up feeling that those are the values promoted by Portland, Multnomah County, and the state of Oregon. I didn't think that was the case. If Guardian, CDP, and the state were aware of the conditions and situations at the studio as reflected in the letter, then why wouldn't they do something about them or recognize them in a more timely manner? And there's nothing that should take two years to notice and address. Neil and Amber have mentioned these issues already in their comments. The fact of the matter is that nothing would have been addressed without the input that you have just shut down effectively, that Director Bell has shut down. It's hard for me to imagine funding more low-income housing when this is what I'm experiencing as the way things are dealt with. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And do we have Tom Vincent on the line?
I do not see him yet.
Okay, maybe we could try to go.
You're on mute, Chair
Oh,
Hall.
sorry about that. Could we try going back to Bradford Long if his phone issues are resolved?
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Excellent. Good morning, council. Thank you for having me on today. This is Bradford Long. I'm the Director of Asset Management for Community Development Partners, including Milepost 5 and about 24 assets that we oversee, including a robust construction pipeline. A lot of stuff on the call to talk about. You know, I understand that people aren't happy. I think there's a lot of people from management and ownership that are trying their hardest to address all of these issues. I'm sorry if they're not as fast as people would like, but every issue that has been brought up has been addressed, and we're moving forward. You know, we have, regarding the conditions on site, I mean, I work in Southern California. I was just on site last week and a couple of weeks before that. The property looked very nice, as clean as it could be. You know, in terms of security, we have 3 full-time staff who are on site 9 to 5, 5 days a week. We recently added security personnel several months ago that adds another 11 hours a day of coverage for 7 days a week. Regarding the doors, I think there were some issues that we've been dealing with regarding historical tax credits, which makes things a little bit more complicated when you are, working on capital improvements. We were able to work through that. It's a $60,000 investment on our part, and to my knowledge, the first half of the doors were supposed to be installed earlier this week, and the schedule is for the second half to be installed around September 15th. It does take months for these types of projects to go on. It requires a level of due diligence, multiple bids, and being on the construction side, this project as well as others, and all new construction, we're just seeing labor shortages and supply chain issues, create timeline delays across the board for this project and all others. The other issue I heard was something about asbestos in the attic. The attic is not a common area space that any of our residents go into. So, we are looking into that issue. And if there is friable material, we will handle it. But other than that, this is a 91-year-old building. There are plenty of issues that will arise, and we will tackle them accordingly. But just so you know that we have one of the strongest management companies, I think, in the state of Oregon. We have a very hands-on ownership group, and we're doing everything that we can, as fast as we can. I think that's
Okay, we're at 3 minutes.
Thanks for your time.
Thank you for your input. Do we have anybody else for public comment who wasn't signed up?
We do have one hand raised. This person
Okay.
is joining by phone, so I don't have a name. One moment. Go ahead, please.
Hello to the person whose phone number ends in 5469.
Yeah, this is, I'm on. Chairperson Bell and members of the council, are you hearing me?
Yes, we're hearing you just fine.
Tom Benson, an immediate neighbor of Milepost 5. In the last meeting, Holly Forsman of Guardian Management made comments that, quote, a milepost is located in a problematic neighborhood, located 1.5 miles from, quote, Portland's deadliest block, newspaper article she read. She also stated that, quote, Milepost 5 really isn't the problem, it's the neighborhood. I imagine the working class members of our formerly peaceful, multicultural neighborhood would be deeply offended by these statements. Milepost 5 was calm, safe, low-income artist housing until Community Development Partners purchased it. Let's look at the facts. If you go to Portland Maps and look at the crime statistics for the block, you will see 14 assaults in the quadrant around Milepost during the last year. That's 14 assaults in 1 year. However, if you go to a quadrant to the block's west, north, or south, you will see 1 assault per quadrant, and for many blocks around. Many of those 14 assaults we're quite familiar with. Portland's deadliest block, as she calls it, is well on the other side of the 84 freeway. It is not the same distance from Milepost 5, or rather is the same distance as to say Mount Tabor Park. However, even if you look at 3600 Northeast 82nd, quote, Portland's deadliest block, as it were, you will see there were 7 assaults there in 1 year, half the amount that is near Milepost. These are city figures. Milepost isn't in the middle of some fantasy crime zone. Rather, the possible mismanagement of the building has turned it into a magnet for crime, assaults, car theft, alleged sex trafficking, and drug sales. Rather, we have had criminals brought to our neighborhood. And I find the othering of blaming phantom outside different people really distasteful. Yes, this is just one small example of the sort of misdirection and dissembling. But OHCS needs to ask itself, If this one isn't true, what other statements are equally false? Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. I think I saw that one more person had raised their hand.
That's correct, Chair Hall. Connie Hunter.
Okay. The floor is yours, Connie.
Thank you so much for allowing me to participate, even though I wasn't signed up. Chair Hall and members of the council, I'm Connie Hunter from Curry County. I've lived in Curry County since 1997. In fact, I used to look at our zip code and remember it was 1997. I was 41 years old. And it was the 5th day of our vacation, 97415, that we found our home in Curry County that my husband and I retired to. In full disclosure, I am the vice chair of the Coos Curry Housing Authority, but I am not speaking as a commissioner or on behalf of the Housing Authority. I just wanted to let you know that I recently had the opportunity to have an email exchange with Director Andrea Bell, and I was so pleased and profoundly, well, it was jaw-dropping to feel and know that I was being heard and that the concerns of rural areas are being factored in to the work of this council. I really appreciated the comments of the first public speaker today from Habitat for Humanity. One of the things that she emphasized was streamlining those grant applications. In working with Alex Campbell as our regional solutions team coordinator, one of the things that I really advocated was across the landscape of grant funding coming from the state, that streamlining should be a part of that. I'm very pleased to know that Alex Campbell is at OHCS, but we sure miss him down here. So please give a hearty hello to him. And thank you for your quick response, Director Bell, and for hitting the nail on the head with regards to the conversation and the information included in that email. With gratitude, I say that.
Thanks very much. Okay, one last call for anybody who would like to offer public input. Move on to the report of the chair and a few things that I would like to celebrate, and I would hope everybody on the council and agency staff would celebrate. You know, as of last month, the agency has surpassed the goal of creating 1,000 permanent supportive housing units. In fact, the investment is now in more than 1,200 units. I don't know if are there any council members who might want to offer some reflections on that milestone? Okay, let's talk about you know, in real estate, people usually say location, 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 but with affordable housing, it's supply, supply, supply. Director Bell was recently asked to testify before U.S. Senate committee in Washington, D.C. on the role of the LIHTC program in our nation's affordable housing system. You know, this is really major, and the timing couldn't be better, given that it intersects with Oregon reaching its private activity bond cap, which is something we've discussed at previous meetings. And I think the bottom line here, you know, state leadership really gets it and is doing whatever it can to increase the number of affordable units in the pipeline. But to really, you know, really see the kind of production we'd all love to see, that it's really, I think, going to take congressional action to make a lot of housing projects pencil out. Director Bell, any reflections you'd like to offer here?
Thank you for that, Chair Hall. I guess just a couple of things. I know we've talked a little bit about private activity bonds, but I guess just to add some additional texture to it, both for the council and anybody that may be listening this morning. So the long and short of it is just the economic volatility really stemming from the pandemic has, as we know, has resulted in, you know, both soaring housing costs, unprecedented demand, but also rental vacancies that are at a historic lows. Market rents are at an increasingly alarming rate. Facts I know that we know. But the conditions of what this has really exacerbated is a mismatch between supply and demand. And so recognizing that we're at a time when we obviously need to continue increasing the supply of affordable housing. And as part of those conversations that we engaged in at the Senate Finance Committee, really the impetus of it is to really push and advocate for legislative action, congressional action, to do a couple of key things that have a major impact here in Oregon, and specifically our ability to make the dollars and cents pencil out to really increase the supply of affordable housing. So really what we're asking for, what we're pushing for collectively, not just OHCS, but so many of our partners across the state, is to lower the 50% test to 25%, and then also being able to increase the cap as well. So we'll have more conversations about that, but the long and short of it is seeking congressional action so that we can do more with the resources that we have to invest in affordable housing.
Thank you. So I want to then talk about something that's certainly dear to my heart, dear to a lot of people on the council, and really a significant number of Oregonians, and that is the issue of meeting rural housing needs. You know, I was glad when we put together the 5-year state housing plan that the unique needs of rural communities were called out, and I think the agency has continued to act on and recognize this reality. I am a leader with the Association of Oregon Counties. A group of commissioners reached out to Director Bell to seek a meeting, and I participated in that online meeting, really wearing 2 hats, my rural county commissioner hat, as well as my Housing Stability Council chair hat. And I really thought it was a productive dialogue, very positive dialogue. I think my fellow commissioners were basically saying, we want to be at the table. We want to do everything we can to help. You know, county commissioners often can play a unique role as community conveners. A lot of us are on the boards of our community action agencies, housing authorities, other key partners in housing development. And this meeting was really part of a larger effort by the agency to actively engage with rural leaders, to hear from them on how the agency can best be a partner. And, you know, one final reflection I'll offer is that we often discuss the fact at HSC that we need to work intersectionally, because housing is racial justice work, and systemic solutions require understanding of the needs of Black, Indigenous, and people of color all across the state. So that would conclude my direct chair report. And now I will pass the baton to our executive director, Andrea Bell.
Yeah, wonderful. Thank you for that, Chair Holland. Good morning, council members. It certainly is good to be in virtual community with you again during this monthly time that we have together. I'm going to yield most of my time over to our deputy director, but I do want to, hopefully I'm not taking us off track, I do want to just make a couple of brief comments, not responses, but comments to the comments that we received this morning from both the tenants and the neighbors that continue to express their very explicit both care for their community and the concerns about what they're experiencing, specific to the property themselves of what they're either observing or hearing or seeing, but also community issues, community concerns that they are witnessing. And while the broader community issues is not something that's within OHCS's purview, I do want to be responsive to what we are hearing. And just to be really honest, I think what I'm hearing from the conversation today, from the comment today, is a couple of key things, and I'm not going to attempt to re-articulate everything that I heard, but I want to make a couple of really important statements and make sure it's clear about what our role and responsibility and action is hearing the continued comments from this morning. So one, I want to just make sure that for the record that I will take this back to follow up with our team around the building concerns that we heard affirmatively this morning. I'm hearing some very specific concerns articulated, and so we will take that back and follow up both with the community members, but then also we will, as I committed to in previous meetings, we will continue to reserve space here at this meeting so we can have the necessary public dialogue about that. And then I think the other piece that I'm hearing, and I want to just be really just kind of blunt about it, is we did send a letter communicating a number of things, one of which was to really detail out roles and responsibilities. So it was clear about what's within OHCS's ability to affect and what is simply without, and what are the resources there for that. But what I'm hearing from community today is more is needed, and there is still more work to do on that. And specifically being that what I'm hearing from today's comments is wanting to make sure that there is transparency, appropriate transparency within the dialogue that we are having with our partners who manage and oversee the building, so that community members can be privy to that within the context of what we can share. And so what we will do is take that back and identify an opportunity where we can add some additional texture beyond what's in that letter, to make sure that community members know, have more detail of both the action, the conversation that we're engaged in, the progress related to that, and to be able to have some means of open dialogue so that there is, quite frankly, just transparency around the conversations that were had, and want to make sure that it is clear that as a state agency, that is our responsibility. That is part of our responsibility. And if we are falling short in that, we want to be responsive to that. So I will take that back with our team to identify the proper avenue for that. And again, appreciate the continued time and willingness for folks, both tenants and community members, to be here to uplift the concerns. So with that, I will yield back and I will turn the time over to Caleb Yant, who is the Deputy Director of Oregon Housing and Community Services. Take it away, Caleb.
Great. Thank you so much, Executive Director Bell, Chair Hall, members of the Housing Stability Council. For the record, my name is Caleb Yant. I use he, his, him pronouns. I am the Deputy Director of the agency. And I have some important announcements and information about that to share. And one of the reasons that I am so proud to work in this agency under the leadership of Executive Director Bell is we almost always, at least often, lead with our values. And so I'm going off script here, and just as it relates to the comments that Executive Director Bell just made, what we heard in public comment, one of those values is being human-centered. So I just want to affirm as I start my remarks, and we hear community members bring up real situations that are impacting their lives, and we think about our role and what is within and without our power, as Executive Director Bell shared, that is a value that we hold dear in our agency and does in fact guide our thinking and the work that we do. So today I am here to share some really exciting news that will impact our agency's strategic direction for years to come. As council members know, as members that are members of the public, business partners tuning in, know we've had 2 interim directors leading our affordable rental housing divisions and our housing stabilization divisions for the past several months. And if I'm being honest, for affordable rental housing, it's closer to a year that we've had an interim director in that role. Today, these interim directors have now become permanent directors in our agency. So I want to reintroduce, I want to congratulate Natasha Detweiler-Davy for affordable rental housing and Jill Smith in housing stabilization on becoming permanent in their respective positions. And rather than me explaining, why Natasha and Jill's education experience, and really importantly, why their values elevated them to be the top candidates in this role, I want to make sure that they're able to share that from their own voice in their own words. And that will happen at the top of each of their divisional agenda items. So right after I'm done, housing stabilization will go, and then affordable rental. So we'll give time for them to share some remarks there. And I also want to take this moment to share with the council, with our business partners and others that are of the public that are tuned into this meeting, how both Andrea and myself, Director Bell and myself, envision these roles. As one thing, the second thing, why this is such an important strategic milestone in this moment in time for our agency. And then finally, I want to share a little about why I personally am so excited and dedicated to this work. And I'm going to share that as to how I intend for that to show up as I work with Jill and Natasha in these permanent director roles. So hopefully the council will give me grace to just take maybe 10 minutes or so to talk through those 3 topics. So first, the vision for these roles. About 6 months ago, as a leadership team, we made a minor but also very strategically important organizational structure shift. My role as a deputy of the director of the agency, I've had that role for a couple years, and that was expanded to include oversight of the program divisions, so affordable rental housing, housing stabilization, home ownership, and their disaster recovery, in addition to the central services operations side of that. And as we made that change, we emphasized a few key distinctions on roles. So part of that was for Andrea, Director Bell, as the executive director of our agency, recognizing the size, the impact, the demands for OHCS to be the voice in Oregon on housing as a policy leader, to really embrace that role. It has never been greater than this moment in time. Andrea, as the executive director, needs to and is very externally focused on building partnerships, strengthening relationships, carrying our message, the message that we get advice and direction from the council on, carrying our message out, our values, and importantly, the policy direction to leaders across the state. So yeah, that's kind of the focus of Andrea's role. My role as deputy director is to get us to a place and to really be laser focused on getting to a place where our operations, our processes, our procedures, the way we interact with our business partners are up to speed, or ideally ahead of our aspirations. We have the statewide housing plan that has very strong aspirational comments. I appreciate Chair Hall flagging some of those important milestones that were made. We have made bold aspirations, and we need to make sure that our operations are up to speed with that. And we know that through the pandemic over the last couple of years, areas of deltas between those two has only been exacerbated. So that's a place that I'm laser focused, both within central services, how our, everything from HR and IT and accounting, how we support our teams, operations and program delivery, how we interact with our business partners. And candidly, and this is, I know, a conversation we've begun to have with the council, how we interact with you, how we in fact do get advice, where it is that you do provide approval, and so how we operate with the board itself. We must evolve our business process to work for us, to be efficient, to be user-friendly, repeatable, and timely. So that's where my focus is. And then for the directors, Jill and Natasha in these permanent roles, the thing that we were really clear on is that they are, as we are a larger organization, the clear autonomous leaders for their programs, both publicly and in decision making. It's not Andrea, Director Bell, Executive Director Bell, or me presenting to the legislature, presenting to the governor on all facets of the agency. It's Jill and it's Natasha and it's Emma Shea and it's others that are directors in our agency. They provide that voice and that leadership. And as Natasha and Jill step into this role, I want to be just really abundantly clear on this. They have the authority, the autonomy, and the expectation to drive the work forward and make decisions however that needs to happen, because we know they are in alignment with the shared values of our organization, which is being human-centered, it's being proactive, it's being conveners and thought leaders, it's being committed to continuous improvement and responsive to emergencies. So that's a little bit about the vision of the roles. I will go quick through the rest of it, I promise. I want to pivot to a little bit to why this is such an important milestone considering where we are at. And I know the council members have seen this, and certainly staff have felt this, the evolution of OHCS over the last 3 or 4 years. Just thinking, and this is by no way to disparage prior work of, decades of work of the agency that has been fantastic. And up to 3 or 4 years ago, we were a tax credit or tax allocator. We were a bond issuer. And for our services, we were primarily a formula funder. That was our role. And we are evolving to, as Executive Director Bell just said, a housing finance agency that for the first time ever has totally maximized private activity bonds solely in the 4% low-income housing tax credit program, bringing in more federal resources than ever before into our state. We're not just a bond issuer, but we're a secondary market financing agency. And we're not just a formula funder, but we're a values-based leader working to create a coordinated and concerted effort to end homeless. And also a disaster recovery agency. We have evolved in our role significantly. As it relates to equity and racial justice, we have always been an agency that respects equity. And guided by this council and our statewide housing plan, we have evolved to an agency that leads with racial justice, an agency that's committed to pushing our learning edge to reverse the patterns of racist housing policies, where white dominant organizations are the major, and in some offerings, the sole recipient of our funding, and where BIPOC community members are systemically oppressed. And we're an agency that has evolved from, some council members may not even know this, 8 years or so ago, we were given 1 year of a 2-year budget and asked if we should continue to exist as an organization. And we had to report back to the legislature. And during that time, we very much had a kind of stay out of the paper mindset. And we have evolved to an agency that boldly chases the right thing to do. It was working daily to be the voice of housing policy on a statewide scale, and to bring OHCS and housing into the next era. And we've received and seen repeated gestures of trust by way of, if nothing else, appropriations from the legislature in this evolved role. So I say that all to say that we are at a milestone as we're embracing our size and scale, and as we're continuing to push the envelope. Jill and Natasha, our leaders, have the opportunity to infuse our values into the operations at an entirely different scale. And I want to end my comments by just quickly sharing, again, just a little more personally about why I'm excited about this and why I do this work. My education, my entire professional career has been in kind of accounting, master's in business. And my career is focused on financing and higher education fields. And then here at OHCS, most of my time at OHCS, I had about 7 years as a CFO of OHCS. And as I think about my education, my experience in higher ed and housing, and frankly, prior generations of roles similar to mine, did stuff like created the GI Bill. It was an amazing tool to help veterans receive higher education, become college graduates. And doing that, knowing full well that mainstream colleges did not admit BIPOC veterans. So this benefit was not available for everyone. Or if BIPOC veterans were able to access it, it was only through vocational schools. Prior generations of roles similar to mine created the VA and FHA loan programs to enable the dream of home ownership, and did so while adopting redlining, making homeownership the greatest single builder of generational wealth in our country inaccessible to BIPOC households. And more recently, prior generation of roles similar to mine watched as the funding model for higher education shifted from in the 60s to 80s, where about 70% of revenues at colleges came from government subsidies, to now where it's almost 100% of college revenues come from the student. And that's for those that have generational access. It allows graduates to graduate with much less debt. With that then speeds the ability to access home ownership for those graduates. And again, just perpetuates the racial wealth divide. So I say this as I think why I do this work as a white male leader of our agency. I do this work because I want to recognize systems of injustices. I want to get better at recognizing them. I want to recognize them to the point that I get mad about them and I do something about it. I do this work because I want to be a courageous person and a leader who stands up for what's right and doesn't make the intentional choice to ignore injustices. I do this work because I want to not just get better at recognizing the injustices, but I want to amplify my personal internal tug, the personal internal pull that recognizes to do something about it. And I want my kids, I have 3 young kids, I want my kids to grow up and be better than I am at that. And I say this all in context of this announcement of Jill and Natasha assuming this permanent role, because as I provide leadership to them, as I work with Jill, as I work with Natasha, as I work with their teams, as I focus on operational excellence, this is the lens that I want to see my work through. And this is how I want to hold myself accountable, and I want others to hold me accountable too as I do this work. So thank you for the time. I will cede it back to you, Executive Director Bell or Chair.
Councilmember Lee.
Thank you, Chair Hall. Thank you so much, Caleb. I always appreciate when someone comes and centers their own learning and experience in, the work that we're talking about. So I just want to appreciate the vulnerability that you just shared with us about your own experience and your own lived experience. That is actually a hallmark of human-centered design. I also want to extend my deep, deep congratulations to Natasha and Jill. I'm sure they are thrilled. It is very challenging to be in an interim position for any period of time. And with the amount of work that has been flowing through those 2 positions, I just want to say right on. Very happy for you. Congratulations. We had a conversation and a presentation from OHCS HR last month about demographics and hiring patterns and where we saw our opportunities for growth. And I'm wondering, it doesn't have to happen now, but I'm wondering if the council could get a report on the demographic makeup of the executive leadership team. at your level, Director Bell's level, and all of the assistant associate directors within the organization, because those are the highest places of leadership here. And I'm wondering how these two last appointments have impacted the demographic makeup and balance of the executive leadership team, even within the conversation and the values that you were just espousing. So I don't need a response now, and I would love to see that information at some point, again, in our ongoing discussion of, how we show up and who we show up as matters and impacts the work. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Lee, and I want to thank Assistant Executive Director Yant for really a quite personal, moving, heartfelt presentation today, and I'll join in celebrating these two promotions as well. Director Bell, do you have any further comments under your report?
I will yield. I just saw Councilmember Mena's hand up, so I will fall in line here.
Okay. Councilmember Mena, you are
Thank
up.
you, Chair Bell. Wanted to echo Councilmember Lee on the comments in terms of the congratulations on the challenges to come ahead with the appointments, the permanent appointments in those two positions. I think definitely it is well earned, and I look forward in working with both of them as we move forward. In the same line, I understand that at least one of the positions were posted. I'm not sure if both of them were posted. We'd like to know kind of what Councilmember Lee mentioned is, did that process go through, the appointments go through that hiring process? Did it bypass that hiring process? And just to better understand, as we talked about, again, from HR and the equity and the recruiting process of the position. So thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Mena. And just very quickly, I will say that they both went through full competitive recruitment processes. And I think if it works, if it is okay with the council, we'll give a little bit more information on some of the unique and different things that we did in this recruiting process to really try to center equity and racial justice in how we showed up in this recruiting process. And so we'll send that in line with in addition to the leadership demographic report.
All right, anything else, Director Bell, before we move on?
No, just I just echo the sentiments of congratulations both to Natasha and Jill, and I also want to just appreciate and uplift the council's continued engagement in racial justice at all levels of our work. I want to just really acknowledge the place that we're trying to be and where we're not quite at yet, and recognizing that part of our intention. Well, let me just be clear. Part of my intention and our shared intention of bringing this regularly into the agenda, into the conversations beyond the outward facing facets of our work, is both for the public to better get to know us as an agency, who comprises the agency, better understand our processes. And then I think to also make sure that we are doing our due diligence of being very clear about our values, so it's clear about where we're trying to go. And we won't always get it right. I promise there will be failure as part of that process. But the hope is that we can fail forward and continue and have be in closer alignment as an agency of the people. And we are leaning into and always what it means to do that from a racialized perspective. And so I just appreciate the council's continued pushing, commitment, and willingness to prioritize that during this time beyond agenda items and outward external facing work as well.
Hey, thank you very much, Director Bell and Councilmember Sandoval.
Yeah, thank you. So I'm hearing I guess a bit of a critique in terms of I guess kind of the representation issues within these hires. So I'm wondering if in the future it might make sense to I don't know if you've done this in the past, but have someone from the council participate in high-level hires of the agency. So I guess that's more of it's a question. What do people think about that, and has that been done in the past?
So I can maybe start with what I know, and Chair Hall and maybe others want to opine. So I know, Councilmember Sandoval, that we have had previous recruitments in which members of the council have participated in those, not in every single one, but I know we certainly have had. We certainly have gone through recruitments in which council members participated in those. I think if we would be willing to, certainly have a conversation if there's any specific recommendations that the council has. I think maybe a fruitful place to start is for us to share what the recruitment process is or was, at least for these two, so that there's something specific to recommend, react to, or, have a conversation about. We can certainly share that just so that you all have visibility into what the process was, who was involved from an agency perspective. And then I think to also just share what we think worked and what didn't work, not just from our perspective as executive leadership, but also from participants across the agency who have given us some honest critique about what they think worked and what didn't work too. So we're happy to share what the process is, just so that council can provide, have more insight and give feedback. And I don't know, Caleb, if there's something additional you want to add that maybe I've missed.
No, I agreed.
Anyone else? Okay, why don't we move to the report of the Housing Stabilization Division and Jill Smith. Is Director Smith on the line?
I am here, Chair Hall. Thank you for this opportunity to speak to the council. I really appreciate it. Council members, Director Bell. I've been given the opportunity to speak to you for a few minutes about this new position, and I especially want to focus on my values for a little bit and my background, and then we'll move into our presentation. And I have several of my team members here with me, and I invite them to at least come on screen. I see a few of you out there that haven't done that yet. So after a very challenging process, I must tell you, it is the most challenging interview process that I have ever been through. I'm honored and excited for this opportunity to work as a member of the Housing Stabilization team. I want to, like I said, give you a little bit of background on me and share my values. And before I do that, I just want to let the council know that I've worked with a few of you in the past in my career, and I am so grateful for the opportunity to have your guidance, your direction, and just access to the knowledge and experience that you all bring. And I'm not saying that, I'm saying that very sincerely. I think it will make me a better leader, and it'll make H3, it'll make this agency better. So for the past many years, more than I want to share, I've served in various housing related roles, mostly at housing authorities. I worked in public housing. I've worked in property management, private and affordable. I've run many rent assistance programs. I was an integral part of the team that worked with Speaker Kotak back when they made rent assistance part of protected income source. I'm very proud of that work, and that was so important. When I first moved to Portland back in 2007, the papers were full of no Section 8 almost on every rental ad. I remember just being appalled by that. And most recently, I worked for Clackamas County as the executive director of their housing authority. And for the first time ever, They're actually really developing affordable housing in Clackamas County, which I'm proud of. My favorite position there was working as the Deputy Director of Health, Housing, and Human Services. And the reason that I bring that up is because it gave me the opportunity to really work on the alignment of services in service of the people we serve and to connect those to people receiving the housing. One example that I have a lot of passion around is we were able to work with the Behavioral Health Division to provide culturally specific peer services for folks living in public housing who had absolutely no services at all. That is a lot where my passion lies. That's kind of what drew me to the state, this opportunity to have access to other departments, other resources, partnerships, work statewide in areas that have so little access to resources and so little access to housing, and really work with this amazing team that knows how to make these important connections and fund this work. So that's a bit about my background, and I want to share a few of the values that act as my guideposts as we engage in our mission to create a system of care with a goal of ending homelessness and to ensure that people living in poverty have access to safe, affordable housing. So first, I want to express my commitment to racial justice. As a white woman, I continue to learn and grow in my understanding of the systemic inequities and the institutional racism that's woven throughout our day-to-day lives. I realize that there's no way that I can truly comprehend what that must be like. And I'm so grateful that OHCS has invested in training, which is deepening my understanding. And I openly admit I have much to learn. I want to share with you all, though, that I'm committed to acting differently and doing things differently in a way that will reduce disparities. We're funders and we are policy setters, and we can make a difference. And I am not afraid to be bold. I'm not risk averse, and we need to have that lead our work. People of color experience housing instability, poverty, and homelessness at a much higher rate than white people do. We all know that, and we need to develop the policies that can begin to make some corrections. Under my leadership, I hope that we can engage with culturally specific agencies and seek guidance from those with lived experience like we never have before. We must be intentional in our decisions to lead with racial justice. My next value is improved data systems. I think we need to listen and learn from both quantitative and qualitative data as we make decisions about our investments and our policies. We have to enforce data requirements that will guide our work. Third, I want us always, and I always do, make decisions with the end user in mind, not with what's best for a partner agency or what's best necessarily for OHCS, but let's establish policies with the end user in mind and what's best for them. People living in poverty have enough challenges, and I feel like government doesn't always make it easier for them to access what they need. I want to work to create a culture of trust and transparency, both within our division, across the department, and with our partners in the public at large. Director Bell has been such an amazing example of communicating, sharing what we're doing far and wide, letting people know that we know who they are and we want to understand their needs. And I think communication is key in all we do. I want to invest in my team. The people that I work with. I want to make sure they have the tools, the training, the leadership, everything they need to be successful and happy. We cannot be successful without the people that we work with. I'm not a hierarchical leader. I believe in teamwork, and my job in this role will be to ensure that they have what they need to be successful. And then I believe in a culture of constant improvement. I believe we need to identify opportunity for improvement in all we do, plan for the improvement, execute the improvement, review how it's working, and start that process over again. I'm a big champion of lean. I don't know if you guys are familiar with that, but that's something that we should probably focus a bit on in our work. I think that we could do a better job at ending homelessness. And then finally, I just want to share again how much I look forward to working with this council. We need your guidance, we need your expertise, your experience, and the people of Oregon who are living without a home and in poverty need all of us to do this work better. And I commit that I will do my best. And I appreciate your support. And I'll turn it back over to Director Bell to kind of transition us into the next housing stabilization presentation.
Wonderful. Thank you for that, Jill. I will be very brief and then I'll turn it right over to the team. So council members, so this morning the team has a quite robust package of programs for you this morning. I want to add a little bit of additional context as to both why you're seeing them and why you're seeing them at this stage of their process. So we received, I think renewed might be the right word, but newer to us certainly, DOJ advisement on these particular COVID-related programs. I think most, if not all of them, are one-time funded programs, of which DOJ's advisement to us was to bring them to council for a voting item. Now, as council members know, as we're going through and having the discussions around bylaws and statutes and what needs a vote and what needs advisement, these particular programs found itself in sort of an ambiguous place, but the consensus, the advisement to be safe was to bring them in front of the council, bring the framework in front of you just so that there's full transparency on that and you all have the opportunity to engage and advise on any matters related to these collections of programs. So I wanted to just provide that a bit of context because that is a newer set of advisement that we received from DOJ. So the team will walk you through that. And then of course, in your very hefty packet, there is an immense amount of details on that. So just appreciation for being flexible this morning.
Thank you, Director Bell. And for the record, I'm Jill Smith. I'm the Director of Housing Stabilization. First time I said that, yay. And we are seeking your approval this morning of the Homeless Services and Housing Retention Program Investment Package. Many of the projects within this package were previously outlined and presented to you as part of the legislative budget report. And as Director Bell said, these are one-time funds. These are funds that we need to fully utilize before this biennium is over. Many of the contracts that we will outline for you were identified by the legislation because of our need to utilize this funding quickly. I want to call out that Mike Savara and Giovanni Lopez have really done just a tremendous amount of work putting these together in their teams. And Giovanni has really led this work. And while he's not going to present, I just want to make sure we acknowledge him. And with that, I'd like to turn the bulk of the presentation over to Mike Savara, and he can introduce other team members that will be presenting.
Excellent. Thank you, Director Smith. Really appreciate the introduction, and good morning, Executive Director Bell, Chair Hall, members of the council. For the record, my name is Mike Savara. I use he, him, his pronouns. My title here is Interim Chief Programs Officer at Oregon Housing Community Services over our Housing Stabilization Division, which is quite a mouthful. And I am excited to bring these suite of packages to you all today. along with the team here. You're going to see many members of the team have their cameras on. They're going to be smiling, and they're also going to be the experts that are going to jump in if we have any specific questions and you need clarifications on any of the items here. I'm going to really kind of give a broad overview of many of these packages along with some of my team, and really making sure that you kind of understand the flow. Again, many of these we have talked about. We've brought partners before you to kind of talk about their work on the ground level. So we're really excited to bring these today. And with that, I'm going to share my screen for a brief presentation to kind of guide our time together. Much of this information is also in your packet. So we are going to kind of get started here. So today, as Director Bell and Director Smith said, we are seeking your approval for this package of investments. This package of investments comes from 3 different types of legislative investments in OHCS. Spanning from investments for state general funds that support eviction prevention resources to things that are really focused on supporting our homeless services infrastructure. So you're going to see a broad range of different investments, things that are going to be supporting people at different ends of the spectrum. And also, I wanted to just mention at the top of this presentation that, especially for the eviction prevention packages, you're not going to see the entirety of this package in terms of what we're asking you to vote on today. And the reason for that is because the timing of the DOJ legal opinion actually only affected a portion of the grant agreements. So we actually have many of the grant agreements and processes that are out already doing amazing work supporting people who are facing eviction. And we look forward to bringing those at future Housing Stability Council to really dig in more and bring our partners to talk about the amazing work that they're doing. So again, we're bringing these items to you today because of this Department of Justice legal interpretation. The background context for this is that House Bill 2006 funded $3 million in the 2019-2021 session for a program you may remember called Rental Market Resources. This program helped support things like fair housing counseling, helped support things like tenant education services, folks that were really involved in technological interventions to really support tenants accessing different resources. When we received those resources, it also modified the actual powers of the department bill, which is an important a part of the statute that really gives OHCS its authority. And so because of that modification, even though we receive one-time funds, that statute remains to this day. It's still there in ORS 456-625. And so that statute is actually the basis of why we're bringing this to you today. Essentially, these investments from DOJ's opinion are actually part of that and connect to that ORS 625-17. And so I'm happy to dig it more into that if folks are wanting a bit more of the background on that. But I wanted to kind of mention that background specifically for why we're bringing these to you today. And so broadly, the purpose of these funds is really to increase services and shelter resources as part of creating a system of care for our neighbors experiencing homelessness or who are at risk of homelessness. You're going to see a few different packages of investments, especially on the homelessness side, that are really going to be trying to move the needle for our system and investing in areas where we have historically lacked. Specifically looking at how to increase the number of shelter beds, and especially beds that are supporting unique communities and have unique interventions involved in them, such as behavioral health services and culturally specific programs. So you're going to see a lot of these different types of services, and our vision for this is really to try to promote that system of care to ensure that folks aren't just going into a shelter, but also going into a shelter with the services and supports that they need to actually get out of the experience of homelessness and into permanent housing. Another big part of this is that we're really thinking about how outcomes and the outcomes of these investments will translate into direct change for Oregonians facing homelessness. This is both a process of us really trying to lean into our statewide housing plan goals around building this coordinated and concerted effort, but also helping us to better understand the actual outcomes of the system. It's really important for us to make sure that we're thinking about how these programs and projects and all of our partners across the state are reaching our equity and racial justice goals, are supporting people who are experiencing homelessness, who are disproportionately affected by homelessness, such as our BIPOC community members, LGBTQ community members that are really at higher risk compared to many other folks across the state. So the team is really digging into ways to make sure that outcomes and accountability are core to how these projects are actually going to be functioning. A little bit more on the next one. I'm actually going to pass it to one of our amazing program analysts, Patricia Akers, to talk more about Project Turnkey as we dive into the specific projects.
Thanks so much, Mr. Savara, for the introduction, and good morning, Executive Director Bell, Director Smith, Chair Hall, and members of the council. For the record, my name is Patricia Akers. I'm a program analyst in the Housing Stabilization Division, and I use she, her, and hers pronouns. I'm happy to be back here with you today to provide you an updated overview of Project Turnkey. As you can see on the slide, the Oregon legislature has invested over $124 million into the acquisition of 29 Project Turnkey properties in 13 counties across the state so far. There are more to come with Project Turnkey 2.0. This is allowing us to cast a wider net, making supportive services like case management and housing and health services navigation available in low barrier and trauma-informed ways. In the short term, these motels and hotels are being used as non-congregate shelter for people experiencing homelessness, at the risk of homelessness, fleeing domestic violence, and for those displaced by wildfires. The long-term vision for this project includes conversion plans so that these sites will become a part of our critically needed permanent housing inventory that will include transitional housing, permanent supportive housing, and affordable rental housing. We are also envisioning a shelter stock that is prepared for unforeseen environmental and health crises. Through engagement sessions and needs assessments, serious funding gaps have been identified within our partner agencies' budgets due to unforeseen and additional costs in renovations and operations. OHCS would like to invest $11.5 million in these sites to ensure their sustainability and ability to serve Oregonians in need. We've worked closely with our research and data team to develop an equitable funding formula that incorporates public data like the point-in-time count, in addition to self-reported data from the needs assessments that were administered to the Project Turnkey applicant organizations. If we can move to the next slide, we'll be able to show you the breakdown of the turnkey sites and the funding amounts that have been identified for them through the funding formula. We believe operationalizing this funding is an important step to take to work towards our statewide housing plan's priorities and an important opportunity to continue to actualize our equity and racial justice values and goals. Thank you for your consideration, and I'll go ahead and pass it back over to Mr. Savara to continue the presentation.
Thank you so much, Ms. Akers. Really appreciate that. And definitely, we're going to kind of keep moving through the rest of the package. If folks have questions, if you could just hold them until the end, we're really happy to dive in. And just want to leave this up on the screen for a couple more seconds to make sure folks kind of have a sense for the wide variety of different packages and sort of the breadth of support across the state. One thing that I'm really excited about with Project Turnkey was just that the focus that the Project Turnkey Advisory Committee has had on really ensuring that geographic and racial equity approaches are really thoughtfully designed in how they selected the site. So it's been really great for OHCS to have that partnership, and Ms. Akers has been a key part of that partnership with the Oregon Community Foundation. All right, so moving right next into the next package we wanted to bring to you all today. So we brought the folks from Mid-Columbia Community Action Council back in May, I believe, of 2022 to discuss their navigation center, and they brought in their incredible partners to really discuss more about their work. So that package was actually, or that investment was just a part of a larger navigation center investment that we've been working towards. So these sites were actually originally selected by the Oregon legislature through House Bill 2006 in 2021. And this investment is actually a part of OHCS's strategy here, is really trying to support the ongoing initiatives that are already happening. We heard from many of these projects that the initial investment that did not come through OHCS, really the investments were helpful, but they were not sustainable for them to ensure that the services were robust enough for their vision. So, really thinking about how we're actually able to actualize a system that supports a variety of needs and can bring in culturally specific services and behavioral health services and other key types of robust connections to actual housing placements and other pieces. We wanted to make sure that we were investing this opportunity for one-time funds in projects that were really fitting with that vision. And so through this engagement process with the navigation centers that were selected in 2021, we've been able to set aside this $12 million allocation out of the House Bill 5202 funds, which came in the regular session of 2022. So we essentially received them in February from the legislature of this year. So this resource is really to ensure that these navigation centers are successful in their implementation. It can go towards things like construction, helping them actually build the buildings and renovate the sites, but can also help support the ongoing partnerships that we've been really trying to incentivize, encourage, and in some cases really requiring to be in place. These navigation center sites have a few different, they represent an additional 500 beds into Oregon's really needed system to increase our shelter capacity. Because they're not only focused on just being a shelter capacity site, many of them require deeper levels of investment to ensure that the critical behavioral health services, case management, and other wraparound services are in place. In reflecting on some of the feedback that we received from you all when we brought the navigation center package before, we really wanted to emphasize and support the fact that these navigation centers aren't navigating to nowhere, that they're navigating to a place that can really support and be exactly what that human being, that family needs at that time, rather than trying to think through just operating the business as usual shelter approach. We really wanted to make sure that these were robust services and supports to really meet people where they're at and help guide them to the place that they want to go, rather than a predetermined destination that sort of outputs folks regardless of what their desires and goals are. So this is a big part of why this investment is so critical, I think, for us to really build on this type of investment, and also trying to learn how this investment and this type of shelter approach can influence our other shelter programs, some of our more current service level funds. It can help us create more models and think about how we implement this type of expectation for robust shelter and support services in all shelters across Oregon that OHCS funds. So really digging into sort of how these relate to our statewide housing plan and equity and racial justice objectives, we really wanted to think about how we were able to award the funds using a formula process, as these are a network, a service delivery network that we were able to essentially take $12 million and then utilize various different public sources of information to assess that need, as well as thinking through how we can incentivize those navigation centers to improve the services, improve the partnerships, and really provide those direct contracts and supports with culturally specific providers and behavioral health providers to bring those behavioral health resources, the medical services, and the culturally specific services right on site to ensure that, again, everybody has exactly what they need when they're actually receiving the services. So through this strategy, we were able to really ensure that the sites that were really going toward those partnerships and building those robust connections with culturally specific organizations and other providers were actually able to pay for those services and ensure that those providers were paid adequately as well. Again, really trying to think about these navigation centers as an opportunity to directly invest in this concerted effort to prevent and end homelessness, across Oregon as part of our mission for, under the statewide housing plan, as well as building these shelter capacities and also ensuring that we're thinking about outcomes, that we're going to be working really hard to ensure that in our contracts, these expectations for what the outcomes will look like, what the services that they'll be providing are actually very clear, and that we can track and obtain that data through our homeless management information system. So with that, I'm going to forward to the next screen just to make sure that folks are able to kind of see exactly what sites are actually being funded under this package. So you'll see here, many of these partners are actually cities or counties, which I want to just kind of mention. Our partnership and growing growing connection with many of our local government partners is so important to us right now. We see local government as such key partners in actually being able to think through and deploy compassionate services and supports for folks that are experiencing homelessness across the state. We're really excited about the opportunity to directly work with cities who are really, they've been the ones that have stood up and said, we're going to solve this problem. We're going to support through these investments and make sure that we have the resources and service providers to support these projects. We also have a few that are nonprofit partners that are really stepping in and supporting key projects in their communities to make sure that there are those robust services and navigation center supports across their region. So again, we're really excited about these opportunities. We've actually been to several of the grand openings that have happened already this summer, and it's just really great to see the level of excitement and depth of services that are actually being deployed at these navigation center sites, and many more are going to be rolling out over the next year as well. So with that, I will move on to a really exciting initiative that I'm really excited to bring to you. And we actually do have Tim Mahern-Macias on the call today to answer any questions. Tim is our tribal liaison at OHCS. And I just want to mention huge levels of appreciation for Tim as he has been a key partner in helping us build this connection with the tribes, the 9 federally recognized tribes of Oregon. We brought this concept to you earlier this year, and the team with Tim and some of our core folks on the homeless services team have just been working to build relationship, build connection, and really listen to the tribes about exactly what types of services their communities need. And I think the outcome of this is really speaks volumes to that team's ability to connect and listen and not be so not bring their assumptions about what these communities actually need. And so it's just been a really great honor to see the team develop these relationships. So this is a $9 million allocation to the 9 federally recognized tribes of Oregon through House Bill 5202 to support local existing programs designed to prevent and reduce homelessness in tribal communities. We really tried to ensure that there was maximum flexibility in these tribal contracts throughout the process, really having lots of listening sessions with the tribes, understanding their unique needs. And we were just really thankful for their participation. This really represents the first time that most of us can track back to that all federally recognized tribes have participated in an OHCS program of this scale in more than 30 years. So we're really excited to think about what this opportunity represents, and also thinking about what the possibilities are moving forward. Again, this is one-time funding. We're really excited about our agency's request budget process to potentially ask for and receive additional funds to continue this investment in future biennia. But we're just, it represents an opportunity for us to really help with the disproportionate impact that Native Americans experience in our data sets across Oregon, as they're nearly 4 times overrepresented in the homeless management information system. So this is a great opportunity for us to really dig in and really support their work as they're trying to support folks that are living in their communities. So again, a couple examples of how we tried to really change the sort of internal processes for how we work with our tribal partners. As sovereign nations, we wanted to be very clear that the process of negotiating the contracts and thinking through their needs was really important for us to think about the unique needs of tribes. So a couple examples of what this looked like is that Typically, when we contract with an entity, we set a cap for administrative costs. And that cap is usually a sort of a set amount, and it doesn't really matter whether or not their indirect costs are higher or lower, sort of just a fixed set amount. We heard loud and clear from our tribal partners that sort of set amount process would not necessarily work for all tribes involved. And so we were able to actually utilize their negotiated indirect cost rate agreements, or NICRAs, which is a process that they enter into with the federal government. And we're able to honor those NICRAs in the same way, even though these are state general funds. So this is something we've actually not really ever done with many grants at OHCS through homeless services. So being able to really say, hey, this is what you've negotiated with the federal government. We will honor this and make sure that we meet you where you're at, and ensure that those costs are covered. Additionally, we removed contract language that previously was used that forced tribes to waive their limited sovereign immunity, which is a really important step for the state to make sure that when we enter into contracts with the tribes, that we're not asking them to essentially saying things like, if you want the resources, you're going to have to waive that limited sovereign immunity. So we work really closely with our colleagues at the Department of Justice to ensure that the language actually fit the values of OHCS, that we wanted to make sure that as we entered into these contracts, we weren't having provisions that were sort of impossible or undue on the tribal government. So again, really trying to make sure that throughout the process of engagement through the contracting process, we've been really thoughtful about how to ensure that we are entering into contracts with another government and that they are sovereign nations, and we need to make sure that we're respecting that sovereignty, as well as thinking about the long history of negative impact in housing policy choices that many of us, our predecessors and folks that have been in housing policy for many, many years have influenced. So we really wanted to think about how to do this differently. Again, hats off to the team that's been working through this, and I'm happy to have Tim answer other additional questions. And one more sort of slide here to look at the actual funding package. So you'll see these are the 9 tribes, federally recognized tribes of Oregon. The actual funding amounts were primarily based off of their tribal enrollments. Now, this wasn't a perfect fit. Definitely, we worked very closely with the tribes to make sure that there was unanimous agreement on this strategy, to make sure that everybody essentially could buy in and support the actual investment amounts that they were to receive. And so really excited about that process, and thankful for the tribes to really collaborate. Again, one of the things that we've seen throughout this is that they are individual sovereign nations, and there's no representative process to actually say they all can represent their own, the entirety. So really making sure that we were engaging uniquely with each of them as individual sovereign nations. So this is the investment package for $9 million to the tribes. And then I have a couple more that I'm going to keep us moving through here. Apologies for the quick pace here. So additionally, in thinking about the needs of this system, one of the big highlights that we've been talking about a lot is technical assistance and capacity building. And so this is really an important part of how we're thinking about how to build the infrastructure of the homeless system across Oregon, especially with respect to making sure that our partners who are delivering the services are doing those services, providing the services in a culturally responsive way, and also supporting organizations who have historically not had access to funding, not had access to state resources, federal resources, and who need a lot of technical assistance to work through the bureaucracy and the sort of difficulties in administering many of the different types of funds. So this $2 million set aside is part of House Bill 5011, and it's really for OHCS to facilitate technical assistance to eligible grant entities. So our vision for this is to actually release a request for proposals and bring in partners who are contractors, experts at providing culturally specific services, at providing construction and rehab services, and a variety of other trauma-informed or harm reduction types of services to ensure that we can deploy technical assistance, whether through one-to-one relationships or webinars or other types of supports, to anyone that's delivering homeless services in the state of Oregon, not only our grantees. we really see our role in supporting only, not just our grantees directly, but many of the other homeless services providers that that need support and need advice and need that guidance. And so in this way, we'd be able to essentially deploy technical assistance resources to anyone in need across Oregon through this suite of contractors that we'll be able to procure. We really want to focus on centering equity and racial justice in our approach to bringing in the contractors and supporting those who are actually going to be providing the trainings, as well as really thinking about creating this broad pool of contractors to ensure that we're really tailoring the services for folks that are in need. We're really excited about this process and going to be releasing this RFP with your approval in the next few months to ensure that we're able to really bring in this group and create a process where folks can actually get resources ranging from local government folks that are trying to grapple with the problems of encampments to people that are really trying to increase their organization's focus on equity and racial justice and want advice and expertise in that process. A little bit more here. This is a sort of our standalone package. Our last package I'm going to bring today to talk through is our housing retention program. So this is really focused on eviction prevention and diversion. This is a great time to mention again that this is not the totality of our investments under the eviction prevention and diversion program. The resources that we received from the Senate Bill 5561 in December of last year totals $100 million in state general funds. And so you're seeing sort of just a snapshot of the resources that we're actually deploying already. There's resources out for culturally specific programs and supports for tenants and fair housing resources and rental assistance and other types of really important services out across the state. These are just the projects that remain for us to actually receive your approval for. So really our eviction prevention strategies really revolve around making sure that we have legal assistance for tenants, that we have case management and tenant support and education services for tenants, and then we have mediation services available to really test the concept that mediators can support and provide an adequate support for folks as they're navigating that process, especially as the mediation services are provided in a culturally responsive and in a way that honors the power dynamics that are inherent in the conversations between a tenant and a landlord. And then also really trying to make sure that rent assistance and support services are available for folks. And then overall, we're really trying to think about how equity and racial justice and the disproportionate impact of BIPOC communities is embedded in our intervention. So you'll see a couple of organizations here are really focused on specific communities, especially the immigrant and refugee community, because they have really experienced a lack of access to many federal resources over the pandemic and really need that extra support from organizations that they trust and have connection and relationship with. So we're really excited about the range of these projects. I'm happy to go into details on the specific projects that you see on your screen here, but also want to recognize I want to dialogue with you all and have some time to talk through things as well. I'll highlight a couple of the big exciting projects that I'm really hoping to speak more about. As one of them is the Oregon Worker Relief Coalition anti-eviction program. The Oregon Worker Relief Coalition is a group of many community-based organizations across Oregon that have actually been responding to the problem of supporting immigrant communities across Oregon during the entire pandemic with very creative and innovative human-centered designed approaches to support their communities in a way that really involves their feedback. And so this project is really an exciting one because it's connecting that human-centered design project where the communities themselves are designing the intervention. OHCS isn't actually designing any programs or telling the communities themselves what they need. It's actually the communities doing a pilot project, a $500,000 pilot project, and then them coming back to us and saying, all right, we're ready for the remainder of that 14 million to actually execute on a broad scale this anti-eviction project. So very exciting work that we're looking forward to hearing more about as they finalize their pilot project. And then just really wanting to make sure that we're thinking about the broad systems of really tenant support services like the Springfield Eugene Tenants Association, supporting folks in the Lane County community to support their access and navigation of various different rental assistance and support services programs. We're really thinking about how to think about this investment as a system change and an impetus to really build upon this. So I think that's a big emphasis of this overall package. And again, we really look forward to bringing you additional information on the overall package that you weren't able to see just today, and to bringing you more information about those in future months. And here's the actual allocation table you'll see here, kind of similar to the last screen, and really making sure that we're thinking about how to really design these projects in a way that's supporting the unique and important opportunity to transition to these eviction prevention systems. All right, so our next steps, I want to make sure that we're opening up space for the staff to answer any comments and questions from the council, and also sort of just highlighting our request here is that we're looking forward to looking for council approval to actually move forward on these projects and deploy these emergency resources to ensure Oregonians that are facing housing instability and homelessness have these services and supports available to them. So with that, I will stop talking for a sec and open it up back to Chair Hall for questions and comments.
Do we have any questions or comments from any members of the committee, I mean, of the council at this point? Councilmember Rogers.
Hi, I want to commend you on your work for putting all these different programs together. It's exciting. I am more on the financial side, so I'm not necessarily clear on all of the language for the program side. However, you mentioned that there are behavioral services that that people will have access to. I would like to know if mental is part of that, or yes, how will that be addressed? The other question that I have is, it seemed like you kept mentioning how it's something that they would have access to, not necessarily something they would not necessarily, force is not the right word, but more encouraged to participate, because it's my understanding that sometimes people experiencing homelessness, they may feel like they don't need a particular type of service when maybe they do. So thanks.
Councilmember Rogers, I just want to appreciate your question, and also maybe I think you should give yourself a little more credence on sort of understanding some of these systems. It sounds like you're definitely really trying to dig in. So to answer your question, sort of the term behavioral health, and I apologize for not explaining that better before, that encompasses both mental health services as well as substance use disorder services. So it's kind of a term that helps umbrella both of those terms, both of those concepts. So many of our projects are essentially contracting with those providers of those mental health and substance use services to support people directly on site with those needs. And then to answer your second question, one of the key components and requirements of these projects is actually the low barrier nature. And low barrier is a concept that essentially means that if someone doesn't want to receive certain types of services, let's say they're interested in housing navigation services and shelter, but they're not really interested in talking with a social worker or a psychiatrist. That those types of services that they're not interested in would not be ever forced upon them or required of them. So it's an important piece to make sure that as we support people with their needs, we're offering those services in a voluntary way. We're doing assertive engagement, making sure that that folks are aware that the services are available, but we're never saying, in order for you to get these types of services, you must, in order for you to get into shelter, you must have behavioral health services. That's the sort of difference, in a lot of ways, a key difference between a low barrier shelter and a higher barrier shelter. So definitely that emphasis in the Navigation Center projects is on a low barrier approach. Really good question.
Thanks for the clarification.
Councilmember Sandoval.
Yeah, thank you. I actually had a question for the chair. And sorry for bringing this up now. I should have brought it up earlier. So it looks like the University of Oregon's Office of Community Dispute Resolution is getting some funding, and I'm an employee of the University of Oregon. So I'm wondering if I should recuse myself from the vote.
I think it would be a good thing, just for safety, recuse yourself and indicate why.
Great.
Thank you. And we've got other hands raised. I'm not sure if I'm seeing who those folks are.
Chair Hall, I see Councilmember Lee has her hand raised.
Okay, Councilmember Lee.
Thank you, Chair Hall. So I've got a lot of comments, none of which have to be addressed right now, and just leave them for the team. First of all, congratulations, Jill. I am one of the people who we have worked together in the past. I'm looking forward to doing it in the future in your new role. Thanks to the team for this very comprehensive proposal, and I just have a number of questions that I want to be able to raise with you. I know this is on the fly. I know we didn't think we were going to come back to this process. As we move forward and you continue to report back on implementation, I'd be really interested to see, you talked a little bit about this in some of the navigation places, where this is aligning with the additional resources from the federal government for the ARP funds and then our existing base funds, just seeing how we're being strategic about where we're filling in and how that's working. You've already thought through how you want to fill in and enhance capacity. I'd just like to hear how that's working. Secondly, I'd love to understand, Councilmember Higginbotham and actually Director Bell will remember we did a very extensive homeless planning process with the community action agencies and a number of other folks several years ago. There was contained within it a lot of information about standards for shelter operation, measurement for performance, the places we were trying to go aspirationally. I thought that work was really important, and I'd be interested to hear how that work is going to inform or has already informed how we're thinking about the technical assistance and the guidance and all of those kinds of things. I want to thank you, Mike, for your commentary of navigation to nowhere, because I think that happens way too often. How much longer are, because of this additional one-time only money, how much longer will these navigation centers continue to operate? Because, it's, as you said, it's really problematic to fund a navigation center where you need to become a trusted location in the community, and we don't have the ability to be consistent over many years' time. So I'd be interested in knowing how much longer we'll be able to ensure that these needed resources in the community. As we talk about technical assistance and the standards that we want to hold here, I just want to confirm, and this is relating back to my other comment, that we are continuing to hold our values of housing first and low or no barriers to shelter operations, and that we are not going to partner with people who are still in an 80s style step up, step down model, where if you do your chores, you get off the floor and onto a cot. And if you don't do your chores, you get off the bunk to the cot to the whatever. I don't say that because I think a lot of people are still there, but there still are a significant number of folks who are still there and believe that there's somehow earning that has to happen to be able to have shelter in particular. That was part of the work we did in the years past, and I want to make sure we are still uplifting those values. I am interested with the pool of consultants and everywhere else where we're going to go out for capacity or technical assistance. We should set a minimum participation rate for MWESB providers and consultants, just like we do with construction, right? We set a minimum percentage of what amount of the resources has to go to organizations who identify in that way. It's part and parcel of our organization standard, and I would love to see us set goals. One of the challenges we all acknowledge with the current statewide housing plan, particularly in the area of racial justice and equity, was that we didn't know the numbers and we didn't know how to set goals, and we wanted to explore that. Well, we're almost in year 5. We should be at a point where we can set a goal for participation. It's aspirational, however, we should have it, because if we don't measure and set our goals, then we don't know when we're getting there or if we've gotten there. Do we have any responsibility for retroactively reviewing as the council the things that have already been funded and are already active? I realize this was new guidance, it appears that we're already funding and have allocated money before we had this guidance. Is there any responsibility for the council to actually review the stuff that's already in play, and may or may not? I want to say absolutely thank you for the engagement with the tribal nations. I appreciate the sensitivity and the understanding that you all are expressing in your conversations with these tribes. Two last comments. One is you talked a little bit about this. I would really love us to be explicit about what kind of technical assistance for whom. The providers we already contract with, we have offered years of technical assistance related to racial justice, equity, shelter operations, again, our homeless planning process. We should not be offering technical assistance to those people those organizations, not people, those organizations any longer. We need to be clear about what kind of technical assistance and to whom we are offering it, because the idea for me of offering technical assistance over and over and over again in the same issues for the same challenges doesn't make sense. And at a certain point, people either have to come to the table or they don't come to the table, and then there are, things happen as a result of that. But this idea of we're always offering technical assistance, and it's generally around racial justice and equity issues, doesn't sit well for me. And finally, I just want to acknowledge the language that you and Caleb and others have used today around human-centered design. That's music to my ears. That's like candy. One thing I would offer is that as I have learned more and deepened my own practice, that human-centered design really has a challenge in centering racial justice and equity. And so I would just encourage you all as you're on this journey to learn from our mistakes and look at equity-centered design. Human-centered design is not overtly centering racial justice and equity, and there are a couple of providers nationally who have very, very good models and approaches that I would love to see us adopt from the get-go, rather than going through this journey of first we're in human-centered design, and then we realize there's not a racial justice aspect to traditional human-centered design, and going back then and having to pick up the equity-centered design that I think really is the better place for us to be as an organization. So that was a lot. And again, I don't need answers to it, just advice. And this is the opportunity for me to say these things. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Councilmember Lee, and we will definitely get some feedback back to you about those, so we can make sure we're moving forward with the meeting. I so appreciate you.
All right.
Chair Hall, can I offer just a couple of things? And one of them is maybe a question for the council. So one, Councilmember Lee, I really appreciate all of the sentiments, and particularly around housing first. That is still what we are uplifting, and also recognizing that housing first is not housing only. So recognizing that we're still moving towards a approach that is both systemic, sustainable, and centered on all the intersectional values and work to carry through. On the topic of technical assistance, is really interesting. As I was listening to the team and listening to your comment and thinking about, going back to our role as a convener, and I think that has become clearer actually over the last year or two than maybe it has on the onset of the statewide housing plan, and really trying to ask some questions across communities around how do we convene in a way that is effective for you and not only defined and centered by our own needs or where we think we need to be, particularly on the topic of racial justice and technical assistance. One of the things I would invite a conversation on is knowing that across our system, across our communities, you open up that hood, and there's so much that we have to unravel across our system. It's not even the big stuff, it's the details of things that we have to be very surgical about. And would love the council's feedback on knowing that there is surely an emphatic need for us to continue to invest in technical assistance, wanting to make sure that we are clear on the advisement from council around what precision looks like from the council's perspective of those investments, and recognizing that we are investing as an agency in our own journey and what is our role and responsibility to help providers do that over time. And then where do we sort of also recognize that each of those organizations have to also invest in it if it is a value of their organization. And so the light bulb has come on that maybe that might be worth a conversation in which we could seek the council's advisement on in that.
Would love to have that conversation with you and the team.
Yeah, I'm sensing a lot of interest and enthusiasm here, and I think that would be a great opportunity for us. So I believe we're now at our decision point for this item, which you will see on your
Chair
screen.
Hall, I have my hand raised, but I don't know if you see me.
Oh, I'm sorry,
This isn't it.
Councilmember
That's
Farrell.
okay.
No, I didn't see your hand up. Okay.
Okay.
You're
I
up.
just have maybe a two-part question and a comment. I also just want to congratulate Director Jill. I'm super excited to be working with you. And I want to echo some of Councilor Mary Lee's comments and concerns. I am fully in support of these projects, the intention behind them, the need for it, and the benefit it would have on people needing these services in these communities. A question I have, which will possibly lead to a second question, I am looking at the packet in text, but I couldn't see the screen. So I just want to clarify that the motion that will be put forth to approve, is that for the combination of funding the tribal bands, the nonprofits, and the municipalities? Is it all of those together in one motion, or in one? Are you seeking approval for all of those together? Because I couldn't see what was on the screen.
Okay, well, I will read the motion that's on the screen, and it is an omnibus motion. Approve the homeless services and housing retention program investment package as outlined in the Housing Stability Council packet. So it is.
Okay, so that would include those line item nonprofits, for example.
That's my reading, but if staff has anything to amplify or correct that.
Chair Hall, you've got it right. That is what we're seeking today upon the advisement of Department of Justice, that this was an acceptable process, essentially. Definitely want to name that this is not the ideal process for us, and we are definitely excited to continue, and you all are having those dialogues amongst yourselves as well. So, but definitely that is what we're seeking today, is that universal approval across all the packages that we outlined today.
Okay, so my second question, and thank you for answering that, is just, I feel like I would be remiss if I didn't ask if there is there, I mean, I guess just to be blunt, I see one of the nonprofits that is currently a recipient of $150,000. If this package is approved, has fairly publicly been experiencing some financial difficulties. And I guess my question is, if we approve this universally, which, you know, generally is a good thing, there's going to be a due diligence on OHCS to make sure that these organizations can meet the monitoring and compliance and sort of financial stewardship requirements of receiving these funds. And sort of echoing what Councilor Mary Lee was saying, is there going to be a review of some of those projects in place to see if they're actually having the desired impact? Or is it just, you know, sort of a blind refunding?
Councilmember Farrell, I think I caught the majority of that, but it cut out a little bit for me. So I'll try and respond really quickly. This is Mike Savara, but let me know if I didn't catch all that you just said. So I think you're asking, there are several grantees, probably I can think of a couple at least on here that do have some fairly public and potentially high risk problems happening. And you're asking whether or not OHCS would essentially move forward and award those grantees, or would we be going through our own due diligence process to do pre-award risk assessments? And the short and simple answer is absolutely yes. We are going to be doing those risk assessment processes on grantees that we are able to identify have risky or high risk problems happening. I can think of a couple on there that potentially we're actually in talks with other partners where we would invest in the site, but the actual recipient of the service or of the resources would not be that specific nonprofit partner. And so definitely we are thinking about that, how to proceed and make sure that we're thinking about our fiscal stewardship responsibilities, as well as ensuring that our partners are really aligned with the values that OHCS has around equity and racial justice, as well as our responsibilities to the taxpayers for fiscal stewardship. So I think definitely the approval today does not necessarily mean that every one of these grantees would result in an award without the due diligence and legal sufficiency review from the Department of Justice. So this is a part of the process, but it is not the entire process.
Thank you for that detailed explanation. That definitely addresses my concerns.
Right, Councilmember Mania.
Thank you, Chair Hall. Just a couple questions. One, those organizations that are listed in the request, how would they select? Do they go through a competitive process, or I'm not sure. I don't know how that process works. And going back to the technical assistance question, what does that technical assistance look like? Those are my two questions.
Great question. Great questions, Councilmember Minna. I'm actually going to see if Joshua Fleming, our training and technical assistance coordinator, would mind speaking to the technical assistance question, and then I'll round back to the process for selection.
Directors and Chair Hall and members of the council. I'm Joshua. I use he, him, his, or they, them, theirs pronouns. Thank you for the question and all of the interest in this technical assistance package. I appreciate the feedback and the advice. Councilmember Menia, to your question, what does the technical assistance look like is kind of a hard question to nail down, because the intent of this package is to gather a broad pool of subject matter experts that can provide varied and multiple approach forms of technical assistance as it fits the requests of our grantees and our sub-grantees. So this can look like anything from a Zoom webinar with 100 different participants from agencies across the state. If what comes out of this package is broad feedback that there is technical assistance needed for many organizations about one individual topic, or it can look like localized in-person technical assistance between one organization that may not even be an organization that OHCS directly funds, but is a sub-grantee. And then a consulting agency that we are contracting with that has the expertise. We're also taking into consideration demographics and cultural competency as we make those pairings, as well as geographical location. You know, perhaps an organization will be more comfortable and more successful in receiving technical assistance working with an organization based in their area of the state, or perhaps it's more important to them that they're receiving technical assistance from an agency of similar demographic backgrounds and experience. So it's hard to say what each individual technical assistance instance will look like. The idea of this package is to really center, again, in a human-centered, client-centered approach, viewing the direct service providers as the clients of our agency in this case, centering their specific circumstances, their needs, and their preferences. Why we're doing this broad RFP to create a pool is so that as those individual requests come, as we know, the future holds many mysteries. Who knows what will come around the corner tomorrow? We'll be able to adapt and center our clients and those agencies in each particular instance of technical assistance. I know that's vague and broad, but I hope that that gives some insight to this. I'm also open to follow-up questions.
Thank you so much, Mr. Fleming. Really appreciate the additional insight there. And so, Councilmember Mena, just to round back to your question about selection. So, one of the pieces of this that I think we probably buried the lead on is that these resources were primarily allocated through an emergency process. So the second special session in December of 2021 was really the legislature allocating additional resources for rental assistance and for eviction prevention resources that needed to be deployed very quickly to ensure that ongoing rental assistance and eviction prevention resources were available. Many of those grantees in that special session were actually named in the budget report. Essentially, it's an opportunity where the legislature tells the agency what its intention is to provide funds to. So many of the actual grantees and recipients were named in the bill. The additional piece of that is that we did try to ensure that through that outreach and engagement with experts, we were building that framework that I talked about, kind of those 4 different pieces of legal services, rent assistance, case management, and tenant education, as well as thinking about mediation. And then wrapping that up together, trying to think about how equity and racial justice played a part in all of those pieces, and making sure that we were investing specifically based on what data we had available in who was receiving or who was disproportionately impacted. So a lot of the awards in the eviction prevention package were either named in that budget report, therefore were direct awards to those grantees based on that framework that we talked about. But then in the other packages, the navigation centers, the project turnkey sites, and the tribes, they were actually essentially a process for procurement that allows us to select a network, a service delivery network that is sort of a defined, discrete set of providers, and allow them to receive additional resources through a formula. It's the same thing that we actually do through the community action agencies. If you think about how we allocate resources to 18 community action agencies, we take a set amount of resources and divide it up through a formula process. The same concept applies for these networks here. So essentially, we're taking that concept and ensuring that we're allocating it out through some equitable sort of rational process to get those formula funds out. And that's where those numbers came from for each of the three networks, the tribes, the navigation centers, and the project turnkey sites. The process for selecting those entities, the actual networks, really it was us trying to think about and engage with providers and service providers around what the need was, because we had to make it a fast process. And one thing that we're still working on our internal infrastructure is to be able to allocate resources through a competitive RFP in a more emergent response process. It is not something OHCS Homeless Services has done historically, because we have always been a formula funding organization through the community action agencies. The last time we did a competitive RFP, it took us almost a year from the beginning of the process to the actual awards of those grants. That is something that we need to grow in, something that we need to work towards with our internal teams and build up that capacity and experience to get competitive processes more streamlined and more accessible for organizations. But this process allowed us to ensure that we are getting broad reach to key programs that were already happening across the state, and that were telling us that they needed additional operational renovation resources or they would not be fungible. And so that was our sort of decision-making process. It was really trying to look at that landscape, make some quick decisions about how to ensure that we're reaching our goals, but also ensuring that we weren't going to essentially be unable to achieve this task of allocating this additional resource in essentially a year. And so that was the balancing act that we really had to make, and really think through how to ensure that we're kind of reaching our goals and making these quick investments in these networks, but also ensuring that we're reaching our equity and racial justice goals. hopefully that was a helpful sort of description of that.
It was. Thank you. Thank you for the feedback.
Okay, any other questions or comments at this point? If not, I would entertain the motion on the screen if anybody would like to make it.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, any further discussion? Hearing none, let's go to the roll call, please.
Thank you, Chair Hall. One moment, let me bring this up. Councilmember Farrell.
Yes.
Chair Hall.
Yes.
Councilmember Higginbotham.
Yes.
Councilmember Lee.
Yes.
Councilmember Mena.
Yes.
Councilmember Rogers.
Yes.
Councilmember Sandoval.
I need to recuse myself because I'm an
Thank you
employee
very
of
much.
University of Oregon. Thank you.
Motion passes.
Right. Good job, everybody. Okay, we are running just a bit behind on the agenda. I've got 11:10 and our 15-minute break was scheduled at 11. We do have one other item to review, and if we choose approve from housing stabilization. Is everybody okay with just moving into that item and then breaking afterwards? Okay, let's talk about the rent assistance for youth framework and proposed action.
Thank you, Chair Hall, council members. Again, I'm Jill Smith, the Housing Stabilization Director, and I'm here with Jen Bauer-Leffler, our program analyst for this program. She's specifically been focused on it. She will co-present with me. And we've brought this before you twice as we've developed it and received some really good feedback that has helped us and really steered the development of this program. To kick this off, I just wanted to remind you this is a pilot. We only have the remainder of this fiscal year through the end of June next year to wrap this up, and we have requested additional funding to further, grow this and make this statewide. So we're under a lot of we feel pressure as staff to utilize this funding and to do it well in hopes that we can grow a program to serve youth. As we've invested in doing this work and doing community outreach and engagement with partners, we've truly learned that this is a big gap in our service continuum across the state. This is something we need to invest in. More so in the service piece of it, in the support piece than the rent assistance piece. It's something that we really need to work on. House Bill 2163 authorized us to do this work and funded it. They established what they called a long-term rent assistance program. We are focused on providing housing first programming here, and we know that rent assistance alone is just not adequate for homeless youth coming out of specifically identified areas, including homelessness, a substitute care program, incarceration, correctional facility, detention facility, or other substitute care. So these are folks that have some needs and they need help. They need services in addition to housing, which would of course be offered and not imposed upon them. So I've asked Jen if she would please take us through the program framework that has evolved. And she's also going to take you through our racial justice focus for this program. And we are seeking a motion of approval for this framework for the pilot. And I'll turn it over to Jen.
Thank you, Director Smith, and thank you, Chair Hall, members of the council. The following are some key areas that I want to discuss, but of course I welcome questions about these and other areas as we go on. Our efforts resulted in a program framework that will provide rental assistance and living space for 75 youth under the age of 25 who are or have recently been homeless, in foster care, incarcerated, or residing in dependency or mental health treatment facilities. We will make payments for youth's deposits and fees, provide individualized case management, provide housing stabilization services, including assistance applying for EBT and other such household assistance programs, job attainment and retention skills, access to GED, community college, or trade schools as desired. Additionally, the program will maintain a robust data collection to analyze and assess the program's progress and successes. Regarding equity and racial justice, OHCS has adopted 2 guiding policy pillars for the RAY program: equity and resilience, because those 2 respond to the housing crisis that disproportionately affects minority populations, such as the BIPOC and LGBTQ+ communities. OHCS will apply a targeted universalism approach in which goals are established for all concerned groups. It's an approach that supports the needs of all groups while assuring everyone that we are all a part of the same social and civic fabric. Programmatic approaches include funding culturally specific organizations, robust tracking systems which allow us to track and report on race, ethnicity, and other variables, as well as centering BIPOC, LGBTQ+, and other vulnerable populations by establishing policies designed to ensure recovery and maximize benefits for vulnerable and low-income youth. I'll turn it back over to Director Smith for a conclusion.
Thank you, Ms. Power-Leffler. The partners for this program, while we are contracting with housing authorities to administer the rent assistance, this is a collaborative, and the housing authorities are being required to identify and fund services for these youth. Funding is being provided and has been identified and will be part of data collection requirements as we will be tracking service provision. So the Housing Authority of Washington County, there's a whole list of subgrantees that they will specifically be working with in your packet. They have access to more youth-specific services, which is great. And because of that, they have strong connections to the juvenile correction system, the behavioral health system, and they already have a strong referral system through those entities, through their coordinated entry or homeless system. So that was nice to see. Mid-Willamette Valley Community Action Agency also has strong partnerships listed. They will be serving 20, their goal is to serve 20 youth. Many of them have already been identified. Washington County, I failed to call out, their goal is to serve 40 youth. Many of those have already been identified. And then our last partner representing our coastal and more rural areas is Northwest Oregon Housing Authority. Their main source of referrals will be from the 3 community action agencies that serve the 3 counties that are covered in that entity, which is Clatsop, Columbia, and Tillamook counties. And it will be through their homeless system. There really isn't a youth system in those areas. And so this will be an opportunity for us to connect them with youth services that are statewide. You know, we've had to do a lot of electronic connecting and accessing services during COVID. We've learned a lot, and we're going to do our best to try to invest in helping them to access some youth services for these individuals. Currently, I wanted to bring up one other point that's very important. All 3 of these entities and OHCS expressed a lot of concern about the fact that this is a rent assistance program for vulnerable homeless youth that will end in a year. So all 3 of these entities have committed to should this not be continually funded, which was a really important point that we considered. The contracts outlining these commitments and obligations are currently in the approval process, and with your approval, we hope to have this program implemented by the end of September. And I welcome questions.
Comments, questions from the council? Councilmember Lee.
Thank you, Chair Hall. First, I just want to appreciate, Jill, you and your staff's willingness to slow down even in the midst of like, we got to spend it now, and go back and pick up some pieces. I think it's very much evident in the package that we're seeing here today, even as I want to acknowledge it doesn't go as far as it needs to. A couple of questions and comments. First of all, did I hear you say that the contracts are already in process without approval from the council to spend?
They're with procurement, just being reviewed. They're not finalized.
But how do we determine that these were the allocation amounts for the different areas and the contractors if we hadn't approved that that was where the money was going to go?
Well, with all of these programs, as they're established and designed, we're in constant negotiation with providers. In the event that you don't approve this as it is, we just won't proceed with the scope of work and the design that we've negotiated.
Okay, I feel a little worried about that, right? I mean, I don't think you're going to get into trouble here with the council not supporting this. And I realize we're really concerned about the urgency here, and I'm not sure just sequencing how that works, because you have to negotiate in good faith with these entities and their constituencies or their subcontractors, and doing that outside of the authority to spend seems a little iffy, but maybe I'm just not understanding that's how it's happening with a lot of other of these things. Two is the allocation amounts came from the legislative piece. So Washington County gets this amount, Northwest gets this amount. Was that determined by the legislature, or is that determined by us? And if so, how did we do that?
That was determined, to be honest, based on the capacity of the partner that was willing and able, and their need in their community, the number of youth that needed services in their community that they were aware of and felt that they could serve within 1 year.
So we had an allocation formula that said there's X number of homeless youth in this region, and thus the money will go that way, or there are, this percent of the population is BIPOC, or this percent of the population is LGBTQ, or how did we come to that? Or was it, I can serve 70 people, and then we said, sure, this is how much you can get. How did we determine those allocation amounts?
The allocation amounts were determined simply by finding homeless youth. We know that statewide there's homeless youth. Unfortunately, we don't have statewide capacity to administer this program and to stand it up. So you're exactly right. We did partner with agencies that had the capacity to do this work for a year and continue to provide those services. We, of course, could verify that the youth are present. We have those demographics, but this was based more on capacity at this time.
Sure. I think about the rural parts of the state. Washington County is arguably in the metro area, and the largest allocation is going to go to Washington County, and they're collaborative, right? That might be because there are more young people experiencing homelessness in the metro area. It might not. I'm trying to understand how we got to where we got to. And again, I'm not offering criticism. I'm just trying to understand. It's stuff for us to think about as we go through this process, hopefully, because we'll be funded in the coming year. The final thing I want to say is there is some reference to asking young people about what they need and want. I would really like to ask us to work with those three contractors to create some kind of mechanism. It doesn't have to be a standing council, whereby young people themselves are advising and running this program for themselves in whatever ways and opportunities that can happen. Part of the experience of being a young person on the street is that adults have failed you over and over and over again. We have adults running these agencies who have clearly said to us, we don't know. we don't serve youth. We've got to learn, and we're excited to learn about this. So we need an actual mechanism that's in the structure of the project, not simply advisory secondary, but is baked into the structure that puts enough autonomy and authority into the hands of the young people in this program to say yes or no to program decisions, to make the meaning of the data that we get once it goes there. And that has to be started now before the money starts flowing, so that it's part and parcel of how we begin and approach this. So however we ensure that young people are actually centered in the operation and the formation and the determinations of this project and system is really critical at this point. Thank you.
I agree. Thank you for that guidance.
Okay, anybody else from the council wish to be heard at this time? If not, I would invite somebody to make the motion that's on page 15 of today's packet, that the council approves the Rent Assistance for Youth Pilot Program Framework.
So moved.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. And by the way, I should mention that Council Member Farrell texted me, she's a few minutes ago, that unfortunately she was going into a cellular dead zone and was going to lose her connection with the meeting. So could we have a roll call vote on the motion, please?
Thank you, Chair Hall. Chair Hall,
Yes.
Councilmember Higginbotham,
Yes.
Councilmember Lee,
Abstain.
Councilmember Mena,
Yes.
Councilmember Rogers,
Yes.
Councilmember Sandoval,
Yes.
thank you. Motion passes.
Okay, thank you, everybody. Let me see. According to my computer, we're at 11:27, so we will recess for 15 minutes. So please, everyone promptly return at 11:42. Thank you. It's like, have we got our key folks back yet? It looks like they may still be joining. I think we'll probably want to wait for Director Bell and then get going. Okay, I think we are ready to reconvene the Housing Stability Council meeting for September 2nd, 2022 is continuing as of 11:45 a.m. And first up, we've got a couple of transaction approvals from the Affordable Housing Division. Director Detweiler Dalby. The floor is yours.
Great, thank you, Chair Hall, Executive Director Bell. Before we go into our transactions today, I'm been queued up to offer some words of acceptance around the removal of interim from my title as Director of Affordable Rental Housing. So I have some remarks prepared, and then we'll transition over into the agenda items. I just first wanted to relay my thanks to the Affordable Rental Housing team and executive team and the OHCS community and council for supporting me through what ended up being a very long interim appointment in this position. I love this work. Affordable housing is and always has been a magnetic force for me, from direct service through consulting and research to program and policy development to now. I don't think that there's any underselling the impact that stable housing that is affordable has in supporting families' base needs and overall quality of life. I came to OHCS 15 years ago with a background in urban and regional planning as well as real estate development. And over my tenure, I've been blessed to have worked with several key mentors who have instilled in me the importance of process, transparency, engagement, racial justice, resource stewardship, and a whole lot more. If I could take the day, I could. And looking back, it would have been a surprise to me 15 years ago that I am still here, that I moved into management in the first place at all, and let alone that I am here today filling this role as Director of Affordable Rental Housing. I am so inspired by our incredible team at OHCS, who is continually up for the challenges of navigating the complex puzzles of funding through compliance, and driven by the potential before us for leveraging housing investments to further equity and racial justice. The work of OHCS is so interconnected with my values and interests that this relationship has stuck. And I am honored to be trusted with this position and take the responsibility of moving our collective work forward. And I take that with gravity. So I just wanted to take a couple minutes, and I'll be brief here, just to kind of think through what direction I have around our affordable rental housing endeavors moving forward. And so those are three things. First, deepening investments in equity and racial justice. Second, supporting our affordable rental housing team. And third, expanding system approaches to supporting our work. And truly fundamental to all of these factors will be Housing Council support, guidance, and participation in those efforts. So first, on deepening investments in equity and racial justice, I envision continuing our efforts to connect with the impact of our work for all of us and to harness our passion and drive to further equity and racial justice by digging in on training, discourse, and evaluation about how we can embed racial justice outcomes from funding issuance and capacity building through compliance and asset management. As we know, housing was foundational in establishing systemic inequities, and it must be a driving force in making deliberate change. Our housing and public resources we put to projects should all be used to establish new expectations and move to change in pursuit of racial justice. Moving to action and questioning how we have traditionally done business is critical, and I'm excited by the collaborative work before us to continue these conversations and make sure we do just that. I also want to be second, I guess, is supporting our affordable rental housing team. Again, we have an amazing team at OHCS whose commitment to do this work keeps me motivated and inspired. The work that we do requires that we work in collaboration to execute incredible investments that would otherwise be unimaginable. This work is rarely simple or easy, and we consistently approach it with solutions versus barriers in mind, focused on turning valuable public investment into real community impact in partnership with a robust and driven group of affordable housing developers and management organizations statewide. So as we move forward, I'm keen to support this team to prioritize an inclusive workplace culture, to find ways to expand on internal support structures to allow us sustainable workloads, and more time for proactive planning and engagement. As we continue into our new normal of remote and hybrid work schedules, that we invest in the needed time to create and build relationships within our division and across the agency to ensure that we are all able to tell our story and coordinate to deepen impacts to address homelessness and affordable housing supply deficits. And then third, just is expanding our system approaches to supporting our work. I look forward to finding ways to drive to impacts, both investing in ensuring tracking of outcomes in relationship to our policy intentions, from fund allocations through compliance and asset management, finding sustainable systems that allow us to lean into transparency around our policy and program investments. We need to continue a wide array of programmatic efforts that are underway, including permanent supportive housing, production strategies aligned with equity and racial justice, co-location of affordable housing with early education, creating supports for small and culturally specific development partners, implementing program updates to our 4% program, which we've been talking about all year long, ensuring projects and have the tools and directives in hand to reach historically underserved populations, and expanding structures to support and expand on equity and racial justice, among the many other things that are ongoing that you see come through council. In addition, I see ahead of us the need to execute deliberate strategies around our capacity building, including to support rural investments, and also creating a deliberate preservation strategy that leverages preservation regulations we have in place in Oregon with program structures that are predictable, sustainable, and sufficient to meet the need, and do as much as we can to make sure that we can not only avoid the loss of housing in our portfolio, but also the trauma that the conversion of our affordable housing to market creates for those families. And so I guess for the end, to wrap up the speech portion, I'll just end by reiterating that I appreciate the trust and support from leadership and council and the Affordable Rental Housing Division. And to say that moving forward, I aim to continue to rely on our team, leadership, stakeholders, and council, and really look forward to digging in and finding more ways to support this work. So thank you, and I will, I think, then transition into our agenda with a couple caveats first. We heard several public testimony again this morning around milepost 5, and I just wanted to follow up Executive Director Bell's comments to affirm that as Division Director, we are taking these complaints seriously. We are following up on specific building concerns raised by tenants, and we'll continue to have those conversations and figure out more ways to be able to provide updates and transparency around the work that we're engaging with the property management and owner to make sure that deficits are addressed and that tenants are supported. And so that will be, I think, as we've established as of at this point, an ongoing update. And so before you, we just have a couple transactions today that we'll be putting through for consideration after last month's robust agenda from our division and approvals. We are, I did just want to do a quick verbal update to follow up. Last month, you approved a series of recommendations around our 4% program. I am excited to say that we have opened an application period for that 4% program and so we'll be accepting new applications as well as all of the different caveated layers through September 25th, and are looking to have the qualified allocation plan language released for public comment later this month to implement that. And we have, again, a light agenda this month. I did want to indicate, kind of looking forward to next month, that we will be following up on some of the questions raised last month around what our rural investments look like. In particular, we'll be looking to how have we been performing against our statewide housing plan goals? What are some capacity investment components to be pursuing, and kind of do a full data outline around all of that. As well as reporting from doing kind of reporting and presumably some wrap up around our market cost offset investments. We have to a large extent expended the 50 million, or it's expended or committed the 50 million in resources from the 22 legislative session to address funding gaps. So we'll be able to report on the outcomes and impact of that and what remains before us after that point. And so I think that's it for all of my preamble. And with that, I'm going to hand it to Ty Dunson Strain to present our transactions. And Ty, I'll get the screen share here going.
Good afternoon, Chair Hall, Executive Director Bell, council members. For the record, my name is Ty Dunson Strain, Production Manager, and I'm here to present two transactions, beginning with just briefly, these are two firsts. One Gleason Tower would be the first CLT building in the affordable housing project, and the second, for state, and this would be the first affordable housing project built in over 20 years. So the team is very excited, and commend the project developers for working diligently on these projects. So with that, Gleason Tower Apartments, we with 105 units, as part of our rubrics, we consider this furthering equity and racial justice. It is sponsored by 3D Holdings. It is in the Hazelwood neighborhood of Portland. It includes a range of affordability. It is in a great neighborhood within the Gateway Transit neighborhood. Centrally located to various access points of transit. There, we included a variety of resources, lifts, 4% tax credits, GHAP, MCOF funds, and it has a range of partnerships with the Ethiopian Eritrean Cultural Resource Center and Project Access that'll be providing a variety of services and including employment and access to health services. In addition, 3D Holdings will be partnering with Cascade Management, who's been in the affordable housing property management business for quite a long time, and they are also assisting with the developer with the financial perform analysis and helping them on the consulting side, in addition to their work as a property manager. They have also, as far as our MWSB targets, they are tracking to exceed the goals, and also committed to going beyond those goals based on their existing track record and relationships. This project supports two of the statewide housing goals: affordable rental housing, equity, and racial justice. And in the interest of time, we could proceed to the next transaction, or hold for comments, whatever council prefers.
Well, unless somebody's got a question they'd like to bring forward right now, I'd say let's move into the second transaction, and then we can have discussion on both.
Okay, perfect. So as I previously mentioned, State and Apartments, it's want to be the first project in the rural town of State in over 20 years. 72 units, meets our equity and racial justice criteria. It includes a range of funding, lift, MCOF funds, and 4% tax credits. Has a partnerships agreements in place with Mono and Vienna Star, and also with the MWSB targets. The contractor is actively have past relations with a NAMAC, OMI, and the National Association of Women's in Construction. So they are committed to doing 20% in MWSB targets in this project. And this project meets 3 of our statewide housing alignment goals with equity and racial justice, affordable rental housing, and rural communities. So with that, I see Councilwoman Higginbotham has a question.
You are recognized, Barb. Councilmember Higginbotham, can you hear me?
Yeah, sorry, I hit the wrong button. Can you hear me?
Yes, you're coming through fine.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. Yeah, so it's hard for me to compare these projects because they're all so different. But I was wondering if you could kind of explain, if there is an explanation, why the cost difference between the two. And to me, you know, in my simple mind, I look at per unit cost or per door cost. And the per door cost on the Staten project is almost $90,000 less than the other project. I'm just wondering why that is, and if there's a, you know, if that's just a general expectation. It just seems high. The other project per door seems really high.
Yeah, I would say in general, as you move from tower construction to in Portland, and on the geographic constraints of the site, plus the type of materials needed, makes a substantial difference, even if you're you know, the with CLT having some cost savings, there's still there's still an element to the type of construction being a driver primarily, and then, you know, as opposed to, you know, garden style walk-up buildings, usually wood frame construction spread across a larger geographic mass, reduces the per cost all in number is the but it's a, you know, it's a great, you know, it's a great question, and you know, we you know, and also the late, you know, there is you know, in this market, you know, costs have increased dramatically over all projects. But, you know, I would say that you know, the type of actual supplies would probably be the biggest driver.
Thank you. I appreciate that. You know, because being from a rural area, you know, we talk about constraints on you know, getting labor and how much it costs to even, you know, move materials to our areas. I know that there are other issues in the metro area, but I appreciate learning about what those are. So thank you.
Okay, Excuse me, Councilmember Lee.
Thank you, Chair Hall. I'll just start by saying congratulations, Natasha. I am thrilled to be able to work with you as in this new position. Your leadership and your work to date has just been wonderful, and I look forward to many, many years of collaboration with you and the team. So congratulations, and thanks for sharing a little bit about your perspective and what you bring to the work. Secondly, I just have a process question, which is I noticed that one of the projects, the Gleason Street project, has been through internal review of the Finance Committee and signed off on, but Staten hasn't yet. What happens when we approve these two and then we go back through Finance Committee review and there's some issue, and I think Councilmember Higginbotham, that might be the place where somebody says, hey, you know, do you really have enough to build what you say you're going to build? Can someone just take me through what happens in that event? And then I have one other comment after that.
Yeah, I guess I will give it a shot here, Ty, and then if you have other thoughts, please chime in. I think functionally we've tried to finesse this timing. Is it council first and then Finance Committee? And then have ended up in a place where both are viable. And so it's been signed off and blessed by all of the attorneys. And if there's any substantive change to a project that would have impacted the motion that has presented to council, if that happens through a Finance Committee approval, we would need to bring it back to council. So it's ensuring that those are aligned. And I think at this point, we're feeling confident and secure that we are not going to be revising anything through Finance Committee. To be honest, that we evaluate things on an ongoing basis and expect to just, make sure that everybody is aligned, ask those final questions, and then move it forward. But if there's a substantial revision, we would certainly be bringing it back.
Thank you. And my last comment, which does not need response today, I've been thinking more and more about, we're evaluating these projects from many different dimensions. And a dimension that I've been learning more about recently is the difference in building with steel and concrete versus building with wood, particularly as it relates to climate change and sustainability. And I don't think that's something we easily or quickly just jump into and start saying, okay, this is climate ready or not. And I wonder about, as we go through these processes over the next period of time, starting to have a conversation about what are our priorities and things that we're looking for around sustainability, climate change responsibility, and the types of projects that we are looking for in terms of the building materials, the building approach. Ty, you were just talking about the difference of building up with concrete and steel, expensive and arguably less environmentally flexible than a garden style apartment built with wood. Sometimes you don't have enough space to do the garden style apartments, et cetera, et cetera. So there's trade-offs. I don't think there's a right or wrong answer on all of this, but I'd love for us to be able to have a conversation, and maybe staff could do a teach-in for us on how to start thinking about sustainability as it pertains to these projects and how we're approaching them. We approach them from a racial justice standpoint. We approach them from a cost standpoint. We approach them from a number of standpoints. And I'd love to see how we could start including some climate justice or analysis. And I don't mean, do we stamp it with a LEED gold or any of those kinds of things, although we might get there. I'm talking more a broad conversation so that we could educate ourselves and start to apply these lenses to these projects moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I appreciate that. And I think very timely. I think this is a question that we've been looking at and have folks poking into. So we will be able to seize the moment to bring that back to council or stage a sit-in or a teach-in like that. Thank you.
All right, any more?
I'm always down for a sit-in, Natasha.
There
Just
we
call me
go.
and let me know. Let's go.
You can get me anytime, Mary.
Councilmember Mania, did you have your hand up? Yes.
Thank you, Chair Hall. The only thing I want to say is congratulations, Natasha. It's well deserved. I look forward to working with you. And again, I think they've done the right decision in putting you in a permanent position, just having worked with you so much. So thank you. Good job.
Thank you.
And I'd like to add my congratulations as well. So anything else from the council at this point, or are we ready to approve the resolution for the funding for these two projects, Staten Apartments and Gleason Tower Apartments.
Moved.
Second.
Okay, we've got a motion and a second. Now, if we could have the roll call, please.
Thank you, Chair Hall. Chair Hall,
Yes.
Councilmember Higginbotham,
Yes.
Councilmember Lee,
Yes.
Councilmember Mena,
Yes.
Councilmember Rogers,
Yes.
Councilmember Sandoval.
Yes.
Thank you. Motion passes.
Good job, everybody. Right now, we can move on here to the homeownership division, and Director Perfecto, we've got a couple of presentations.
Hello, good afternoon, Chair Hall, Director Bell, and council members. I'm Emma Shea Perfecto, Director of Homeownership, and we have two items in front of you today. I believe Kim Freeman is on. She was having some technical difficulties earlier. Oh, there she is. Okay.
Good afternoon, everyone. For the record, I'm Kim Freeman, Assistant Director to Home Ownership Programs. Chair Hall, Council members, Director Bell. I do have one Oregon Bond residential loan file for consent today, but based on some of the questions I had from our August meeting from Council Member Mena and echoed also by Council Member Rogers, I wanted to share some information on why we currently bring Oregon Bond residential loan files to Housing Stability Council for consent approval. So it is actually in our statute that says we need to bring information about our mortgage lending program to council. It is then further defined in rule what that looks like, and currently in the statute, it calls for a purchase price limit to be reviewed, and that's how we have sustained the 95% value, purchase price limit value to come to council. Also, further investigation, we have a member of our debt management team, Craig Tillotson, who's been with the agency almost 30 years. So he is what I like to consider our resident guru to the Oregon Bond residential loan program. So I asked Craig for some historical information. And so when this was originally established in statute, it was a way for the Housing Stability Council to see what was happening again in our programs, making sure you had visibility of what was happening and had some sort of approval process in our loan process. Now I want to also share how our mortgage loan process works. A home buyer works with one of our approved mortgage lenders. They go through the process. They work with their loan officer to get approved. Their loan then is approved and funded, and they move into the home. We then receive that mortgage loan package 30 to 60 days after the transaction closes from our approved mortgage lender. We then review the file for our programmatic requirements, that they meet our income limits within the county served, the purchase price, and just ensure the file meets all the other programmatic guidelines. Again, all of these files are underwritten to the federal requirements, whether that's Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, if it's a veterans loan, a VA loan, an FHA loan, or a USDA, which is our rural housing. So they meet all the lending requirements. So there's no question that the loan doesn't meet any of those. Again, we review it for our programmatic requirements. If for some reason council would decide to deny one of our loan files, we then would not be able to reimburse the lender for that particular loan. It would cause some issues with our contract between us and our lender. And then it really kind of more imposes other partner relations, right? And so there's no way in our current process to know pre-approval to the lender that one of our loan files would need to come to council, just because there's changes throughout the process. Sometimes the loan amounts change. There's just different things that happen. So we wouldn't be able to I'm going to say catch this or bring it prior to the loan funded and closed. I know there's conversations now looking with what Director Bell has shared with us around what comes to Housing Stability Council, what is approved. And so in just discussion and sharing today, you will continue to see me to ask for approval if we leave this process in place. We could look at increasing the threshold to a higher percentage, and I would not come on a monthly basis when I had mortgage loan files for approval. We do currently have in place an annual reporting structure that I give you an annual review, usually in February or March. And for Councilmember Rogers, who is new, that is what I like to call the Emmy Awards of our Oregon Bond Residential Loan Program, because we honor our top lender and our top loan officer, and we give an annual look of the previous year of what our production is, our demographics of the communities we serve, the counties that we purchase loan files in. So we do have another mechanism to ensure council is aware of what's happening on our loan production. So that's just really kind of the history and the context. And obviously that's a further discussion with Director Bell and the council on where you would like to take the work that we're doing and ensuring that you still have eyes on our program as we continue to serve Oregonians through our mortgage lending products. And with that, I'll pause just for a second. And if there's no other further questions, I would entertain consent of the current program. Oh, sorry, Chair Hall.
Sorry, I was muted, but I wanted to call to attention, Councilmember Mena has a question.
Oh, perfect. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Hall. Thank you, Assistant Director Freeman. I just want to say thank you for bringing back the information. I completely understand the circumstances, and having the background and knowing exactly where we stand in regard to that process makes it easier to then act on the action. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Councilmember Mena.
Okay, anybody else at this point? Are we ready for a motion?
Chair Hall, may I just, before we do that, I just want to make sure that, again, this loan is located in Brownsville, Oregon, and it does meet all the requirements, and both borrowers, we have two borrowers on this loan have selected not to identify their race. So this is an unknown. And we also have another form that we've instituted over the last couple of years for demographic information. And Councilor Lee, this one is for you. This is the first time that we've had one of our mortgage loan files not select our form to select their demographic information. So it's on the mortgage loan application to self-identify and for the mortgage borrower to identify that. And for a little history for some of our newer council members, our unknowns were increasing over the last 3 to 4 years. And so Councilmember Lee asked us to do something about that. And how could we do that, right? And so we instituted our own demographic form with the same information that's on the mortgage loan application that the home buyer completes, but with an explanation of why we're asking for this demographic information, part of our statewide housing plan, also serving everyone in community. And so we've had a really good increase of our demographics, meaning more reporting, less unknowns. But Cheryl did point out this was the first time that they've not selected on the mortgage loan application and not selected on our form. And normally if they don't do the mortgage application, they do our form. So hopefully that's not a trend, but I just thought I would point that out. So, so we try both ways to get the demographic information. So, and with that, Chair Hall, I am done.
All right, are we ready for a motion from the council to approve these projects?
So moved.
Second.
Could we have a roll call, please?
Thank you, Chair Hall. Chair Hall,
Yes.
Councilmember Higginbotham,
Yes.
Councilmember Lee,
Yes.
Councilmember Mena,
Yes.
Councilmember Rogers,
Yes.
Councilmember Sandoval.
Yes.
Thank you. Motion passes.
All right, on to the last item on today's
Hall?
agenda. Yes,
Could I just jump in here since Kim called me in? I just want to say thank you to Kim and Emma Shea and the team for always thinking about the next thing to try and the next thing to try. This has been, we've done a lot of different things over the years, beginning with tracking it in the first place because we're doing that. So I just want to acknowledge that, it takes years, and with a continual push, we can see these kind of things moving forward. So I just want to say thank you for that.
Thank you very much, everybody, and thank you. We are moving to Talia, who is going to come in and wrap up our discussion on, well, not wrap up. We'll be having continued discussions on development, but for this, she's coming back this month to give you what we've done. And she's worked very hard. I'm very proud of the team and coming in and trying to work with our partners as much as possible. And she's done an excellent job for as new as she is to the agency. So very proud to have her on my team.
Thanks, Emma Shea. And good afternoon, Chair Hall, council members, and Director Bell. My name is Talia Concrevis, and I use she, her pronouns, and I'm an operation and policy analyst within the homeownership division. As Emma Shea said, I briefed the council last month on this homeownership development framework through which we seek to create a robust homeownership development program that allows us to address the need for affordable and accessible homeownership opportunities across the state. So today I hope to gain approval to move forward with this program. I'll start with a refresher on the program goals, but we'll mostly focus on changes we've made to the framework since last month. So just to remind everybody, since 2017, the Homeownership Division has facilitated the construction of affordable homes for purchase through LIFT funding. In 2020 and in 2021, the legislature approved a collective $40 million in flexible funding to start addressing a need to create more housing supply in new ways. This framework represents the foundations of a more robust homeownership program that includes LIFT and also other funds, and we hope to grow and evolve this program within OHCS. So the goals of this new program are, I'll just truncate these goals, are to create new affordable homes that respond to local housing needs, increase the capacity of emerging developers, culturally specific developers, and tribal housing development organizations to access OHCS funding and engage in homeownership development projects. So essentially grow the pipeline of developers that are able to address the dearth of affordable homes and also foster climate resilient, energy efficient communities. Here are the proposed categories for the use of funds. And last month, Council approved the Market Cost Offset Fund, which we're working to get up and running in the next couple months. And the other three categories of funding we aim to make available through a consolidated notice of funding availability to be released in January 2023. And since our last meeting, we've been busy. Thanks to the help of our tribal liaison, Tim, we were able to meet with 7 of the 9 federally recognized tribes in Oregon to better understand their needs. We held 3 public office hour sessions to share updates with our partners and collect feedback from stakeholders. We met individually with nonprofit and for-profit developers to collect more feedback. And we just want to thank everyone who engaged with us throughout this process. And as a result of that feedback, we made some substantial edits and updates to improve the framework. So just going into the first category of funding, our current LIFT funding has been inaccessible to the tribes. So we're thrilled to have the flexibility to align this new pool of funds to meet their needs. We met with tribal representatives to hear about the many exciting homeownership projects underway or ones that are on the docket for tribes across the state and the needs of their community members. We updated the structure of this set-aside grant funds to better meet their diverse needs, to include broader uses such as down payment assistance and home safety repairs for those tribes that aren't yet focused on development projects. We're also structuring this fund with a guaranteed base level funding amount of $100,000 for any tribe that applies and meet the application threshold criteria. Additional funds will be awarded to projects based on the scope of the project at hand. So that's a little bit more about the updates to the Tribal and Sovereign Nation Grant Fund set aside. Go on to pre-development and capacity building grants. The goal of this pool of funds is to encourage new developers or smaller developers to increase their capacity to build housing. We expect to award grants to at least 10 developers of up to $200,000 for the purpose of training for staff to build skills related to housing development, pre-development and planning efforts, funding to engage community members, and efforts to get community members homeownership ready once the homes are built. We've updated the name of this category from planning and TA grants to pre-development and capacity building to better reflect the use and goals of this category. And we also broaden eligibility to for-profit developers that have a commitment and or strong track record of serving people with a disability and rural, BIPOC, and tribal communities. So that's that category. And I'll move on to the third, which is where we've made the most substantial changes. This $26 million in funding will be available to a broad base of developers and used for the development of homes for purchase, including but not limited to fee simple, community land trusts, co-ops, cottage clusters, or any other models that fit the needs of the community. The funds can be used for acquisition and rehabilitation of existing housing for conversion to affordable homes for purchase, new construction, scattered site projects, and the homes must be affordable to home buyers earning at or below 120% area median income. And this is a new criteria. They must remain affordable for a minimum of 15 years, but we will consider exceptions for this specific requirement based on the case the individual organization makes. And within this category, we're seeking to fund 3 project types: nonprofit developers that qualify for LIFT, nonprofit developers that don't qualify for LIFT, and for-profit developers. So for nonprofit developers and non-LIFT qualifying nonprofit developers, the funds will be deployed as a gap grant that covers up to 90% of the difference between the construction costs and sales cost of the home, with a cap of $200,000 per home. For LIFT qualifying developers, the gap grant will look very similar, except it will be a blend of funds. So LIFT will be awarded first, and then the flexible funds will layer on top of LIFT to fill the gap. This will address some critical needs that we're hearing, that rural projects appraise for lower than they qualify for in LIFT funds. And so it's really hard to make those projects pencil. And there's similar but kind of opposite challenges in urban density side of things. So on this slide, there's a very simplistic example of how this will work. Say that a home construction costs $400,000, the sales price is $200,000. The total subsidy amount would be $200,000, and 90% of that subsidy would be $180,000. And then for the same example, for the LIFT qualifying project, if they qualify for the full LIFT amount, right now the cap is $115,000. The flexible development funds covered the difference between $180,000 and $115,000. So a supplemental grant of $65,000. So hopefully that makes sense. And then for-profit developers can access these funds as a construction loan with the following terms: a 0 to applicable federal rate interest rate, or other terms to be negotiated with the developer. 1.5% of the funds will be in a reservation fee with a term of up to 3 years, and a balloon payment is due upon sale of the home. And we have maximum amounts for the loan based on bedroom size of the house. So for these development subsidies, we have created the following set-asides based on geography and project type. So we're hoping to really spur and support more development in rural areas. So you can see the rural soft set-aside is 50%. And then also 20% of the funds will be set aside for LIFT qualifying projects, 20% for profit, and 60% for non-LIFT qualifying nonprofit projects. And the goal of that is we know that LIFT is really supporting the permanent affordability model, and we want to really leverage these funds to support more diverse models beyond the community land trust model, but also use some of the funds to make sure that those community land trust projects work. Some of the key selection criteria that we've identified is here. I won't go into all of these, but when applicants meet a minimum criteria through their application, they'll be scored on this priority criteria. One of the updates that we made is just the maintaining affordability and having a plan for how they will do that and meet the 15-year requirement or make a case that that doesn't work for their model. And here's a little more about how project selection will work. Once this framework is approved, we'll prepare the NOFA, Notice of Funding Availability. All applications must meet minimum requirements to move forward. A scoring committee will be assembled to review all the applications, and the committee will rate and rank project applications and make funding recommendations to OHCS's executive director. Director Bell will review the recommendations of the committee and approve the final funding recommendation to the Housing Stability Council. And we aim to have all award selections finalized by June 2023. And so with that, I'll open it up to questions and also share that, our next steps are to prepare the NOFA and to speak to the public comment earlier today. Our goal is to make this process as streamlined and accessible as possible. So one of our plans in the next month or two is to host a public session to gather ideas and input from prior and potential applicants on this process. And then our plan is to launch the NOFA and have a lot of outreach and information sessions surrounding the time period. So I'll pause and see if there's any questions.
Okay, council, any questions or comments at this point? Councilmember Sandoval. Go ahead.
I'd like to say I like the different elements of the proposal, so it's great. I did have kind of a the agency's been working hard to provide funding for families that were impacted by wildfires, and I think we've done a great job of outreaching to the Latino community in Southern Oregon, and I'm wondering if there's ways to piggyback off of that for this program, because some of those families are going to have access to fire funding, and so it seems like this would be like a great way to kind of build from that program. So I don't know if you've explored that at all.
Yeah, thank you for that connection. I think that is a really great opportunity to build off of the work that they've done, and a good reminder to us to connect with that division and collaborate on the rollout of this. Thank you.
Excuse me, Councilmember Lee.
Thank you, Chair Hall. Thanks, Talia and Emma Shea and the team. This is great work. I appreciate seeing the feedback that we talked about at last meeting reflected here. I really want to appreciate the information around metrics for each one of the issue areas. And again, I know it's very hard for us to set these things and we don't want to be wrong about putting a number in or a piece of information in. And until we do that, it's going to be hard for us to assess ourselves. So I want to just congratulate you all and appreciate that you have added a column to each one of these funding opportunities that offer some metrics for us to be able to judge ourselves, our performance by. And secondarily, can you confirm we have the flexibility, because these are soft set asides, that if the funds in one category aren't being utilized to the way we had hoped for, we can move them into the other categories as we're in flight on this. Is that correct?
That's correct. They're soft set asides. And I think we will want to compare projects within each set aside category with each other. But if there are not enough, then we will move funds to other categories where there's more demand.
Perfect. Thank you.
Anyone else? All right, I believe we do have a motion, which would be to approve the framework as presented in this memo for the homeownership development program. Yep, and there it is on screen as well. Would anybody?
Moved.
Hello?
Second.
Okay, we've got a motion and a second, and a roll call now, please.
Thank you. Chair Hall,
Yes.
Councilmember Higginbotham,
Yes.
Councilmember Lee,
Yes.
Councilmember Mena,
Yes.
Councilmember Rogers,
Yes.
Councilmember Sandoval.
Yes.
Thank you. Motion passes.
And that brings us to a close of today's agenda. And I know it seems inadequate, but all I'll say is, wow, once again, a lot of lively and valuable discussion. And this agency just keeps responding to challenge after challenge, opportunity after opportunity. So I thank everyone who's been part of today's meeting. Wish you a good month of September. And until then, we'll be adjourned.